Folks, come on in, find a seat. Senator, I apologize for the interruption, but I want to make sure you could be heard. Thank you. Go right ahead.
I think the main point I want to make is that regardless what anybody's actual position is regarding these regulations, AB 32, I think we'd all want to agree that we need to have a good understanding of the economic impact on changes that we're embarking on, and that is what the purpose is for this bill. I would respectfully request a favorable consideration to this bill. I have with me today Jerry Condon of Condon Johnson and Associates, and also Jim Lyons of Sierra Research to provide any additional testimony, for this particular bill.
Thank you, Senator Dutton. Folks, what we're going to do, consistent with our custom and practice in the committee, is ask that we have two witnesses who speak for no more than a couple of minutes each, and then after that we're happy to hear from folks who just want to give their name, their organization, if any, and their support or opposed position. So, Senator Dutton, you've identified your two witnesses.
Yes, sir.
This would be a good time for them to speak to the committee, and we want to welcome you. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jerry Condon. I'm a contractor and the owner of Condon Johnson and Associates. We've been in business for 35 years. I'm proud to say that we are able to employ approximately 200.
Sir, I apologize. Could you pull that microphone up a little bit closer? And folks in the room, the acoustics in the room are great. That's the good news. That's also the challenge. It means we can hear everybody in the back of the room. We could ask you to keep things quiet. We'd appreciate that. Speak right up. Thank you.
Okay. We employ approximately 250 salaried and union field workers. Condon Johnson is a family-owned commercial foundation and specialty drilling contractor. We have worked on such projects as the Bay Bridge, temporary bypass, Devil's Slide, emergency repairs, and the Alaskan anti-missile silos. We perform work throughout the western United States, and throughout the years have managed to acquire approximately $35 million of specialty drilling equipment. 3 years ago, we began to assemble fleet information and prepare for compliance with the new CARB diesel regulations in California. We hired a full-time equipment coordinator to assist in this effort. It was determined that we had 96 pieces of CARB-regulated equipment. About 75% of the regulated equipment were either Tier 0 or Tier 1 engines. We were faced with replacing, repowering, or retiring our equipment incrementally. As you can imagine, replacing and retiring equipment is extremely costly, especially in this economy when the value of used equipment has dropped dramatically. However, what we discovered, and what CARB perhaps did not understand, was that the repowering was in fact not possible due to the intricate nature of our equipment. I have made copies of an email from Peterson Tractor, who does the upgrading for your reference, which addresses that issue. Complicating this issue further, in California are all the companies trying to move older equipment to comply with CARB. An example of this is illustrated in our purchasing and selling equipment summary that has also been provided. I have highlighted for you the sale and purchase of equivalent size rigs. As an example, we purchased a new rig for $831,000 and sold an older rig of the same size in good condition for $325,000. I've also demonstrated the cost for equivalent 900 CFM compressors. A Tier 3 used is $103,000. We've been offered $20,000 for a Tier 0 equivalent. In these times, these are difficult costs to swallow. I also want you to know about the VDEC retrofits, the process to capture particulate matter from diesels prior to release into the atmosphere. They're also impossible to install on some of our equipment, and extremely costly when it is possible. To illustrate, I've attached a quote showing the expense of retrofitting. I'm not a politician or a policymaker, but it seems to me that asking an objective third party to determine what economic impact these regulations will have, and if they are even technologically feasible, is extremely reasonable.
And sir, I do need to ask you to wrap up. We're well past 2 minutes.
To clarify, I'm supportive of environmental issues. I think this is something that's fair and just, and I hope that the evidence I provided you with today helps you better understand why this bill is needed.
Thank you for your testimony. Before we bring up your next witness through the Sergeant at Arms, we do have a photographer. If you'd like to come back briefly in the next 2 minutes, take any shots from back here you need to take, and then ask you to vacate the dais, okay? Thank you. Next witness, Senator Dutton. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jim Lyons. I'm currently a senior partner at the independent air quality consulting firm Sierra Research, based here in Sacramento. I'm also a former CARB employee. I spent about 6 years at CARB, and my responsibilities there included the development of regulations to reduce vehicle emissions. In addition to my work developing regulations while at CARB, I've been in Sierra Research for almost 20 years, during which time I've performed independent reviews of dozens of CARB rulemaking analyses that they use to establish the technical feasibility and costs and cost effectiveness of their regulations. At present, as you're aware, CARB staff both prepares the technical and economic analyses used as the basis for their rulemakings, and they're also responsible for responding to comments and critiques of those analyses during the rulemaking process. It's been my experience over the course of my career that concerns I've raised on behalf of my clients with CARB that are based on my independent review of their analyses are usually either dismissed as being biased, even though I'm an independent consultant because I've been paid for, or my time has been paid for by a company that's subject to the regulations, or they're dismissed by CARB staff because they, quote unquote, disagree with my assumptions or my conclusions, often without much more support than that being provided for as a basis for their disagreement. Given my experience, I think SB 960 would be invaluable in ensuring that future CARB regulations are based on the best available technical and economic information. If I can give you just a few examples of things that I've seen in my career that I think could have been dealt with by an independent review, I'd appreciate it. The first one is CARB's assessment of electric vehicles. Back in 1990, when they first adopted their electric vehicle mandate, they predicted that significant volumes of these vehicles will be available by 1998 at a cost of about $2,000 more than a regular car. This year, their estimate is these vehicles will be available somewhere in the 2015 to 2020 timeframe at a cost of about $22,000 per vehicle more than a regular car. Obviously, had this information that they're presenting now been made available to the original decision makers back in 1990, there probably would have been a fundamental difference in the rules as they were originally adopted.
I'm going to ask you to wrap up your remarks, please.
Okay. Let me just go to the Cool Cars regulation then that was recently abandoned by the agency. In my independent review...
Forgive me. Wrapping up means wrapping up. Okay.
I appreciate the opportunity, and I do believe that having an independent review of CARB regulations would be a good thing.
Thank you for your comments. Senator Dutton, if you'll permit me, we do have a quorum assembled. I'd like to ask staff to call the roll so that we can establish a quorum.
Simonian.
Here.
Runner. Here. Corbett. Hancock. Lowenthal. Here. Pavley. Here. Strickland.
Quorum has been established. Members, it's my understanding that Senator Hancock is out today with sort of a medical situation, so we hope to see her back soon, but we are working a little bit shorthanded. Other witnesses in support who would like to come forward and simply give their name, their organization, if any, and state their support position for the record, please.
Dorothy Rothrock, California Manufacturers and Technology Association, in support.
Thank you.
Norm Plotkin with the California Automotive Wholesalers Association, Automotive Aftermarket Industry Association. Cheerleading is not objective analysis. Support the bill.
All right, and folks, let's stop for a moment. Mr. Plotkin, you want to come back? Let's try and follow the rules, everybody. We've been through this time and time again. When you're asked to give a name, an organization, and a support or oppose, that means name, organization, support or oppose. Mr. Plotkin, you're a veteran. You know better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew Hargrove, California Business Properties Association, support.
Thank you.
Brenda Coleman, California Chamber of Commerce, in support.
Thank you very much.
Kirk Blackburn, California Tow Truck Association, in support.
Thank you.
Kevin Pedrati, Engineering and Utility Contractors Association, in support.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members, David Wolf, Howard Jarvis Taxpayers Association, in support.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman and members, Mark Smith on behalf of the American Council of Engineering Companies and the Infrastructure Delivery Council, in support.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, Phil Vermeulen representing the engineering contractors, Marin Builders Association, Flasher Barricade Association, and the California Fence Contractors. Strong support. Thank you.
Next witness.
Kelly McKechnie on behalf of Western Growers, in support.
Greg Oxley with Al Wagner Construction and the Engineering and Utility Contractors Association, in support.
Thank you.
Betty Plowman, California Dump Truck Owners Association, in support.
Thanks.
Skip Brown, Associated Engineering Construction Employers in California, support.
Thank you.
Julie Broyles, Associated Builders and Contractors of California, in support.
Thank you.
Deborah Matos, California Independent Oil Marketers Association, in support.
Thank you.
Bill Gregg, California League of Food Processors, in support.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, Louis Brown on behalf of the California Grocers Association, in support.
Thank you.
Dennis Albion on behalf of California Grain and Feed Association, several other agricultural clients we support.
Thank you. Other witnesses in support? Witnesses in opposition? And again, 2 for 2, and then others who are name, organization, if any, and their opposed position. Witnesses in opposition.
Chairman Smitty and members of the committee, my name is Dan Cobb, representing the Union Concerned Scientists, and I just passed around a letter that has a number of other organizations that have indicated their opposition to this bill. Very simply, all state agencies already are required to do a fiscal cost-benefit analysis for any regulatory proceeding that they're required to do or they choose to do, that they're allowed to do under the law. Furthermore, ARB, as well as other agencies under Cal EPA, have additional requirements that no other agencies have. So we're already, the Air Resources Board already has extensive additional economic analysis requirements and alternatives analysis requirements, more than agencies that are not under Cal EPA. So this is, we feel overall that this bill is unnecessary. Much of what it is in the bill is duplicative. Some of it is we would consider onerous and completely unnecessary and won't give any new information to any of the parties once this additional analysis is allegedly done. We also call into question how the Office of Administrative Law would do some kind of technical analysis that we don't feel they have the expertise, and it's not within the scope of their expertise to do such an analysis. So we think that provision in particular is inappropriate and off base. But overall, we would oppose this bill. We think the impact of this bill would be to cause extensive delays in the finishing up of regulations from now until forever on important matters dealing with protecting the public's health. And so we believe ARB already does a thorough process. It's a transparent process. We realize people don't always like the result of that process. They're charged with protecting the public's health when it comes to air quality, and they do a good job, and we believe that this is unnecessary, and that's why we oppose the bill. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question of the witness, so
sure.
I can do it now or
sure.
Come back.
Do you want to
now?
Why don't we let the witnesses finish, and then we'll come back, and we'll just have you stay, please. Thank you, Mr. Runner. Next witness.
Mr. Chairman and members, Bill McGavin with Sierra Club, California, in opposition. There are a number of bills introduced this year that would make various changes to the regulatory process, some of them across the board, some of them targeted at particular agencies, many of them targeted only at the Air Resources Board. And we're certainly considering all of these. There are some of these bills we're going to support, some we're opposing. This is one that we oppose because we think it adds an unnecessary, expensive, and time-consuming layer to what is already a fairly lengthy rulemaking process. Certainly, we don't like every result that comes out of the Air Resources Board, but we do appreciate the fact that it's a public process. Generally, rulemakings are accompanied by multiple workshops, as well as, of course, being adopted at a board meeting where the board members appointed by the governor vote in public after taking public comment on those. So we don't think the Office of Administrative Law has the expertise or the budget to add this layer of analysis to what's already being done.
Thank you for your comments. Do we have others who would like to indicate their name, their organization, if any, and their opposed position?
Yes, Victoria Rome with the Natural Resources Defense Council in opposition.
Thank you. Mr. Kolb, you'll stay close by, please.
And Mr. Chair, Bonnie Holmes Jen with the American Lung Association in California. We're also strongly opposed.
Thank you.
Nydia Bautista with the Coalition for Clean Air, also in the opposed.
Thank you.
Tina Andolina, Planning and Conservation League, opposed.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Timothy O'Connor, Environmental Defense Fund, we're opposed.
Thank you. Are there any other witnesses in opposition?
Tom Addison, Legislative Committee, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, in opposition.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? If not, Mr. Kolb, if we could ask you to come back, and we'll go to Senator Runner, who had a question. Sure. And thank you for your patience, Senator.
Real quick, just to follow up, one of the things you had mentioned was the extra economic analysis that is required under law that ARB is required to do.
Yes, if the regulation...
Hang on just a minute.
Oh, sorry.
I'm going to ask you to go through that with me so we can understand that. And then I'd also then like to understand, then you said that this could add a lengthy amount to the regulatory process. And help me understand, I would assume that this would be done as these regulations would be made, and then they would just be addressed through the existing public hearing process, which doesn't sound like it lengthens anything. It just sounds like it's just added information that would take place during that time. So maybe if you can help me on both those points.
Okay, I'll do my best. And if there's anybody from the Air Resources Board in the room, they may be able to add information to the answer to your question. ARB, and my understanding is other agencies under the Cal EPA have an additional economic alternatives analysis that they're required to do that agencies that are not under Cal EPA are not required to do. And this is for all regulations that would cost over $1 million, which is most regulations. $1 million is not very much money. If you asked me to tell you the details of what exactly that means, I couldn't tell you, but ARB probably could if they're here.
You just testified that it was good enough. So.
No, I'm saying that it's an additional analysis dealing with an economic analysis of alternatives to the proposed regulation that they are required to do. That is a reality. They have that requirement, and they do that because they have to, and so they do that. I couldn't tell you every little step of that analysis, but I know they do it. I've seen reports. I've seen documentation.
Okay.
The other question was
the issue of the length of the additional time.
I can't speak for the Office of Administrative Law. I know that they are not one of the agencies that do things quickly, and I would think anytime you add something substantial to a regulatory process, that it's a strong chance that it could extend that process, and to assume, as you apparently are, that it's going to happen simultaneously and it won't add more than a day and a half or so to the whole process, I think is a wishful assumption. I think it's more likely it will add months, if not longer, because
And you make that analysis?
Well, just based on observing how long it takes the OAL to do things. Okay. And we're all understaffed. All agencies are understaffed. It takes them a while, and that's understandable. Okay. I suppose if you're going to pay for additional staff, then they might be able to do it more quickly, but there's no money for that, obviously.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions?
It doesn't need to do it now, but I'm going to ask the author to respond to what they would observe as the inadequate analysis that are currently then required under law by ARB.
Senator, let me, at some risk to both of us, let me see if I can frame what I think your argument is. As I hear you on this issue, your concern is that the ARB is mission-driven, that because it is mission-driven, the analysis that it provides in connection with its mission may not be wholly objective, and you would feel more comfortable on behalf of the people of the state of California if there was another screen through which that analysis was put. Have I basically got the gist of your argument?
Well, that's part of it. I think one of the realities we have to deal with as a legislature is that there are certain people that will make investments into California and expand businesses based on clarity and what's happening. And so far what's happened with regards to the way CARB has been going about coming up with their regulations is somewhat questionable. You're going to have to create some comfort levels there. So a lot of the questions that were raised, I can address these concerns that were, because we actually did look at a lot of these things because we're actually trying to come up with some way to do this better. and to also create a comfort level, a surety, and so there doesn't seem to be as much confusion and chaos. So you're right, but it even actually goes beyond that, because I think there's things here that we can do that'll actually help make the process better. And if we can eliminate some of the confusion, it'll definitely become a model that can be followed. Right now, it can't be.
Before I go to other members of the committee, I just have one question, and forgive me if I missed this earlier. The bill previously anticipated using the LAO's office, as I recall.
Right.
You've made the judgment, legislative analyst's office. You've made the judgment now to go with the Office of Administrative Law. What was your thinking in making that change?
Well, because they're already part of the process. And so taking a look at who would be more appropriate to take charge of this, they just seem to be the logical agency, mainly because they are part of the process. It won't lengthen the requirement, and you aren't creating something new here. With regards to any technical, lack of technical capability they may have, they can always contract out for the necessary expertise that's necessary. I know that when people talk about funding sources, for an example, in the governor's budget estimates, $18 million will be left in the fund at the end of 2010, 2011, in CARB's fund from fines and penalties and so forth, and that actually could be the source of funding in order to have the third-party analysis done under the OAL.
Thank you. Senator Lowenthal, thank you, sir.
Yeah. I'd like to pursue the question about what is a major regulation. You're saying that they would do major regulations. You would have this additional step, or the step of having the Office of Administrative Law prepare the analysis. How did you determine a major regulation to be at $10 million? And from that, how many regulations are we talking about per year are $10 million more than that would be fall under this? And if you're really questioning the adequacy of the ARB to conduct an economic analysis, do you feel comfortable with even the $10 million number?
Well, the examples that I gave prior to your arrival was the off-road diesel, for an example, where that estimate was originally it was a 3.4. It turned out to be like 4 times that amount, a $13 billion problem. We also had the problem with the analysis and the estimates done for for cement companies and so forth, which actually out of the 10 companies located in California, the estimate was like a little over $200 million, and that's what the cost of retrofit is on one plant. So I'm talking about substantial changes in the way we're doing
$10 million. How many are we talking about in the past year or two? How did you choose $10 million, and how many regulations would fall under this? I just need to know the scope of what we're talking about.
I'll allow my witnesses here to address that.
I believe historically that there was a regulation that set the $10 million as a threshold for review of ARB actions. During the course of their history, there have been a number of requirements for reviews by state agencies that are no longer in existence dealing with economic impacts.
How many are we talking about? How many? You picked a number and you said when you reach this threshold, this triggers another agency to get involved. That's real. How many? I just need to understand over the last how many regulations we would be talking about, roughly, or historically, if this was done in the last 2-3 years. How many regulations are we talking about?
It's probably on the order of 10 to 20 regulations a year, depending on the agency's regulatory calendar. And again, the $10 million, I believe, is something that was established historically, and it may be in statute, I'm not sure.
That's what a major regulation
is?
Yes. So you're using that definition, but the definition, the numbers, you're not clear how many regulations this would encompass.
Most of the ARB regulations, I think, would fall under this definition, not all of them.
Most would fall under the major regulation.
Yes.
So we would have a dual process on most of the regulations.
I wouldn't call it really a dual process. It's already a requirement for them to do it anyway. What we're trying to do is make the process better by having the Office of Administrative Law actually take a role in it because it's already part of the process. So they're really not being asked to do anything more than what they're already supposed to be doing now.
Can you tell me a little bit about then what is the Office of how many staff members do they have and what do they do now?
I'll have to get back to you on that. That's part of their function. They're just part of the process that's currently in place. I don't have specific details on their operation.
I just don't know what they do.
The Office of Administrative Law is required to review CARB regulations for procedural requirements, make sure that they've responded to all the comments, that they're not doing something called creation of underground regulations and things like that. It's an administrative review to ensure that they've followed the proper procedures.
Have they ever done economic analyses?
Not to the best of my knowledge.
So do you see them having to ramp up to do that?
Yes.
Do you have any idea what those costs might be?
No, I don't.
Thank you.
Other comments or questions, Senator Lowenthal?
No.
Senator Pavlik?
No, I was not at this time, but I appreciate Senator Lowenthal's comments, and I was concerned about the duplicative nature in adding another agency yet to review. I was wondering, Senator Dutton, if you attended some of those ARB hearings?
Pardon?
Have you ever attended some of the Air Resources Board hearings?
Yes, ma'am.
On the stakeholder process, which is
yes, ma'am.
Lengthy.
Mm-hmm.
And is it transparent?
Well, let's put it this way. A lot of the participants within there don't really feel like their concerns are really being addressed. And it's not just because people are ignoring them. They just don't get a sensing from the way it's conducted that they actually their concerns are being addressed.
That probably is true from a variety of perspectives, depending upon the outcome.
Could be, but when you're talking about major policy changes like this, I think it's important for us to try to get it right. And so far, based on prior performance, it would appear as though we could be doing it better.
Do you think the legislative process through oversight hearings might be a different approach than relying on a new agency and ramping up on the costs of reviewing?
Actually, it isn't a new agency. They're already involved in the process, and current law already requires CARB to do an economic analysis. We're just suggesting that they may not be the best group themselves to do that analysis based on prior performance, and there has been errors. So what we're trying to do is help make more clarity into the process and also give it more credibility.
My experience with CARB has been through the California's Clean Car Bill, the tailpipe emission bill. Essentially, their engineers and everyone that got involved in that was able to really quantify effective technologies to reduce emissions from the tailpipe of automobiles, saving motorists money at the pump. They have the engineers and the technical expertise, and that's the reason AB 32 was placed in CARB, because automobiles are the single most significant emitter of greenhouse gas emissions in our state. And I didn't know if you'd followed that process or what you thought about.
Actually, I was part of the discussion about putting it into CARB to begin with back when it was set up, because Jerry Brown was suing the county of San Bernardino regarding AB 32 and the various requirements of AB 32 even before CARB was going about implementing the program. And what it was felt at the time in the discussions that I had is that the governor's office wanted to make sure that there was a sound economic basis for the regulations that were going to be imposed imposed by CARB because nobody wanted to end up creating undue harm or hardship with the economy of California. Now, at that time, the economy was a lot better, and it was felt that CARB would be the more appropriate agency. Unfortunately, knowing what I know now, I would say that that was probably a mistaken judgment, and it was something that I had tentatively agreed to at the time, and I just, like I said, I think we could do it better. The public hearing processes that you're talking about, I think politics comes into play too much on those. What I'm looking for is if this is really worth doing, and if we're going to be doing it, it should be done right, we should be not afraid to have other people take a look at it. Now, if this is just one of those situations where we just want to push everything through and it doesn't matter if it makes good, sound economic sense or not, and if everybody wants to believe that they're just it's either CARB's way or no way, then, you know, frankly, I guess I should stop wasting my time. But I'm sincerely trying to figure out a way to do this better. I do know this. Because I've been in the business of bringing forth investment capital and so forth. You've got a lot of confusion and chaos that's taking place out there in the business world right now, and you need to give some clarity and you need to give some certainty as to where we're going with this. And right now, that just doesn't exist.
I'll save the rest of my questions as comments at the end. Thank you.
I think this may be that time because we're going to go ahead and take comments from committee members, then go to Senator Dutton for a close, and then ask if there's a motion on the bill. I don't want to ask for the motion now because the rules of the committee include further debate or discussion after motions on the floor. So if we can go in that order. Any other comments, Senator Lowenthal?
No, I think I've asked.
All right. Senator Pavlik, please proceed.
Yes, thank you very much. And of course, I will wait to hear your close, but some of these comments I'm not sure have a lot of merit. Obviously, participation through the CARB process is absolutely critical. One of the people that testified during your presentation gave, for example, the cool cars regulation. Well, that shows by example that problems came out through the discussion and the transparency of the process, and those were pushed forward, and there's different ways to have cars, as far as air conditioning, operate more efficiently and saving gas mileage. That has nothing to do with the Clean Car legislation that's now part of the national agenda. That was also strongly opposed. And what I found with CARB is generally speaking, when they've come up with targets to reduce emissions, our innovative businesses here in California have not only met them, but they've also exceeded those targets. The technology and R&D capabilities in our state is amazing. We're also seeing with the passage of AB 32, we've already sent a clear market signal to the investment sector. Millions of dollars of venture capitalist money have poured into the state, and it continues to widen over time. In fact, the projections just from this quarter this year show that 60% of all the money nationally is pouring into California. Why? Because we've created that market of certainty for investment right here to ensure a clean, secure energy future. I do think Senator Dutton brings up a good point. I think legislative oversight hearings are very helpful and important through the process. I'd certainly be supporting that. I'm not sure that the OAL has any expertise in the technical allowance. They are administrative procedural overview, having a duplicate review of costs. There have been a lot of analysis also done by different organizations relating to cost-effective strategies that small businesses in particular can pursue with any cost being minimal, and that's before energy efficiency measures are in place. I want to remind everyone emissions reductions don't begin to 2012, not this year, not next year. but the following year. And I will carefully be following CARB's work on this issue. They know they are being watched carefully, and that's a good thing, and I think the legislature should be reviewing their work as well. What other states have been doing in relation to what California's been doing, what you may not know, 30, you probably know, but 30 to something states have renewable portfolio standards. Senator Simitian, you're leading the way on that issue here in California. 14 states had adopted our clean car laws that are now the national standard, and all much of this work had been based on not only CARB but other agencies' very thoughtful experience in coming up with cost-effective strategies to reduce emissions. One thing that hasn't been discussed, or I haven't heard, but was in your analysis in your report, is the cost of inaction to our state and not doing anything. The health impacts are real, intangible. Air pollution, criteria air pollutants will be increased through dramatic temperature changes. We know on hot summer days our air pollution is the worst. Rising healthcare costs, particularly to our children, where 1 out of every 5 children are asthmatic in places along the LA freeways, as well as Fresno is a concern to me. Adaptation costs, and that I believe is in the analysis as well. So I'm going to be listening carefully to close and other members' discussion, but I haven't heard enough so far to support an additional review by an agency that has had no history of expertise on these kinds of issues.
Thank you very much. Senator Dutton, before we... Please, Senator Running.
You know, it seems to me you cannot have this discussion outside of recognizing California has the 4th highest unemployment rate in the nation. You can't have this discussion realizing that all the kinds of things that we would like to see, many of my colleagues would like to see the state doing for its citizens, is at risk as a result of falling tax revenues, which is directly related to the idea of the number of taxpayers that we have leaving the state of California. I think I've done a half a dozen workshops down in my districts and surrounding areas where I had small business owners come in and tell me, what is it that you're looking for? What is it that concerns you? What's your investment portfolio of the future here in the state of California? And I must tell you, the number one issue that comes up before that group when I talk with them are the issues in regards to the unknown issues dealing with CARB regulations and the costs that are attached to those. And, you know, it's interesting that I think even CARB knows that, but I tell you the way that they're answering that is totally inadequate. Again, from a business perspective, let me tell you that somebody doesn't say, aha, relief is in sight when you decide that you're just not going to enforce penalties. That doesn't tell anybody about what kind of investments they can make in the future. That doesn't relieve them from decision making. And when you've got, at least in my district, many companies that have idly parked equipment that is idle because they don't have work, and now you're letting them know how much money they're going to have to invest in that idle equipment in order to keep it. It makes them decide either to leave the state, lay off more employees, and just shutter their windows and doors. And ultimately, that is going to be the huge penalty that we pay here in the state of California. Again, I appreciate the fact that there are some concerns and some thoughts in regards to that CARB does some kind of analysis. I think there's plenty of documentation to question the quality of what it is that they do. But more importantly than that, I think we have a tradition to at least try to get outside non-involved individuals in the regulatory process to go ahead and at least make some kind of observations in their own analysis. I strongly believe that having CARB do their own economic analysis, as meaningful or not meaningful as that is a bit disingenuous in the fact that they are very much a mission-oriented organization. They know where they want to go. And that, I think, drives them oftentimes from trying to do a complete economic analysis when it comes to these issues and the extent of the economic conditions that are driven by some of their analysis, some of their regulations right now, I think indicates that. It seems to me we need to wake up to it. I think there's not any of us who don't deny that there's at least very serious issues being talked about in the state of California towards where we're going to go with this in the future. And it seems to me that if we as the legislature continue to pretend like there's no issue here, that we are again going to be this is going to be another one of those efforts that we just let somebody else like the public take care of it, because we are denying almost the fact of the employment impact that the CARB regulations are having in the state of California. So I would hope that we would be able to at least move this kind of piece of legislation forward, to have it adequately discussed as we move through these next couple of months, rather than somehow just feel like the system is good enough the way it is.
Any other comments from members of the committee before we go to a close from Senator Dutton? Senator Dutton, I think you will recall I was able to support your previous efforts on SB 295. Afraid I can't reach quite that far this time around, but appreciate the willingness to raise these issues in the committee. Want to let you close, take your time, respond to all the issues that have been raised, and then we'll ask for a motion on the bill.
And basically that's the reason I carry bills like this, is to raise the issue. I'm not doing it just because I want to go attack some agency or so forth. But when I run into situations, and this wasn't just for the economic analysis, although we talk a great deal of that, it also, there's a problem with the technological analysis that's being done by CARB. The lead author of the study that justified the diesel regulations falsified his credentials and even lied about having a PhD. And several board members, including Chairman Nichols, knew about this before the vote, before the board voted on those diesel regs, and they even failed to share that with other board members. That goes to credibility. Okay, we also have the same kinds of problems when I carried 295. And Robert Stebbins, chairman of the EPA Economic Advisory Committee under Bill Clinton, President Bill Clinton, said that CARB's preliminary analysis of AB 32's economic analysis was terribly deficient. Okay, that wasn't me. That's other experts in the business that have said these kinds of things. Now, when you have these types of experts talking about the lack of credibility, okay, it's important for us to restore credibility. Okay, and so that's the reason why I carry bills like this. It's not to attack or tear down or destroy. It's to actually make it better, so that the small business community of California can feel confident about investing into California's future and not have to worry about what this organization is doing and the kind of guinea pig type mentality they seem to have regarding California's role in this type of agenda. So that's the reason I carry the bill. I still think the bill ought to move forward. It's being done with the idea of trying to make it better, not tear it down, but actually add credibility to the process. So I still would request an aye vote, knowing that I'm probably not going to get it.
Thank you. We have a motion by Senator Runner. Call the roll.
Simitian?
No.
Simitian, no. Runner? Aye. Runner, aye. Corbett? Hancock? Lowenthal?
No.
Lowenthal, no. Pavley?
No.
Pavley, no. Strickland? 1 yes, 3 no.
You're short the required 4 votes at this point, but we will hold the roll open so that other members may add on as they come back to committee. Senator Dutton. Thank you.
I appreciate that.
Senator Dutton, you do have another item before us. That's SB 1120. Would you like to take that item up at this time?
Okay, Madam Chair and or Mr. Chair and members, SB 1120. This bill would allow California.
Senator, why don't we interrupt for just a moment? Let folks take a moment to step out of the chambers, and then that way we can hear you uninterrupted. Very good. Thank you. Go right ahead, Senator.
Okay, Mr. Chairman and members, I'm pleased to propose to you SB 1120. This bill would allow California to implement a cap-and-trade program only if California's program is part of a federal or regional agenda program. The AB 32 scoping plan recommends a cap-and-trade program that is linked with other Western Climate Initiative partners. The scoping plan notes that participating in a regional system has several advantages for California. The reduction of greenhouse gas emissions that can be achieved collectively are approximately double what they can be achieved through a California-only program. The scoping plan also notes that a regional system significantly reduces the potential for leakage, which is a shift in economic emissions and emissions activity out of California. It would discourage just being a California and having neighboring states be the beneficiary of our program. That could obviously hurt the state economy even more and prolong our recovery from the recession even longer. Mary Nichols herself testified in a committee hearing recently that it would be better if California had partners rather than going it alone. Cap and trade will increase the costs. The March report from CARB's Economic and Allocation Advisory Committee suggests that allowance prices could range anywhere from $20 to $60 per metric ton. At $60 a ton, I used a higher number because of my past experience in dealing with estimates. I found that we generally have a tendency to underestimate a little bit. But the cap and trade program would increase the cost of California businesses of roughly about $20 billion a year. And that's just the price at $60 a ton. CARB's most recent analysis of the scoping plan shows that allowance prices could be 3 times that amount, which then obviously could have a cost of close to $60 billion to the California businesses. California cannot afford to implement cap and trade in a way that significantly increases the cost by doing nothing to reduce greenhouse gas emissions because of leakage. Implementing cap and trade as part of a regional or federal program is best for both the economy and the environment. I would respectfully request an aye vote. I do have 2 witnesses here to talk on this bill and answer technical questions, and that would be Dorothy Rothrock from California Manufacturers Technology Association and also Matt Hardgrove. He's representing the California Business Properties Association.
Thank you very much. And again, if we could limit our comments to 2 minutes each. Ms. Rothrock.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair and members. My name is Dorothy Rothrock with the California Manufacturers. And I won't repeat what the senators said, but I just want to highlight that California manufacturers have lost over 600,000 jobs since January 2001. And we stand to lose more if we don't make our business climate as attractive as possible. And I feel that the prospect of a cap-and-trade program now as part of the AB 32 implementation is actually sending a signal, a California-only program that is, sending a signal that we're going to be imposing new costs on California manufacturers that will not be similarly imposed on competitors nearby in the western region particularly. The differential between the costs already between California and our neighboring states is very steep for manufacturing, and it's very easy to locate outside the state and just ship in. A cap-and-trade requirement is going to add to that competitive disadvantage, so I encourage you to look at this bill closely and consider supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next witness.
Matthew Argo with the California Business Properties Association. We represent commercial, retail, and industrial properties in California. And definitionally, our businesses can't move out of California. We're very concerned about having such a limited cap and trade as is currently being talked about in California. Due to that reason, our tenants can leave California, though the properties can't. When the scoping plan was passed almost 2 years ago now, we were not opposed to a cap-and-trade program. At that time, people were talking about a national program, and we were talking about the WCI being there. As long as some of our states can band together and do this, it makes much more sense. California doing it solely alone, though, with a couple Canadian provinces maybe, as we're talking about now, we think will have a really detrimental impact on commercial real estate here in California, because we'll see our tenants leaving, we'll see our companies leaving that are currently at those properties, and we hope that the legislature and ARB will hold off on doing this until we have at least a regional program that we can look at. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Other witnesses who'd like to indicate their name, organization, if any, and support position?
Bill Gregg, representing the California League of Food Processors. We are in support as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mark Smith on behalf of the American Council of Engineering Companies and the Infrastructure Delivery Council in support.
Thank you.
Norman Plotkin, representing the California Automotive Wholesalers Association and Automotive Aftermarket Industry Association, in support of the bill.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, members, Anthony Thomas, representing the California Forestry Association, in support.
Thank you.
And David Wolf, Howard Jarvis, Taxpayers Association, in support.
Thank you. Do we have any other witnesses in support? Are there witnesses in opposition? And if so, could we have them come forward? Again, I'd like to ask that a couple of folks sort themselves out for no more than 2 minutes apiece, and then we'll just take others with their Me Too's.
Mr. Chair and members, I'm Victoria Rome with the Natural Resources Defense Council. We were one of the sponsoring organizations of AB 32, and unfortunately we must oppose this bill. We believe that, by eliminating cap and trade as a policy choice, removing a tool from the ARB's toolbox, it's going to make implementing AB 32 more expensive, more difficult, taking options off the table. The EAC, the Economic Allocation Advisory.
Jerome, hang on a second. Let's see if we can get the Sergeant at Arms to help us a little with the audio. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Sorry. The EAC found in its report that cap and trade plays an integral part in California's statewide greenhouse gas emissions reduction program, and we believe a carefully designed program can ensure the reductions that we need and make sure that the goals of the bill are achieved. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next witness.
Senator Smitty and members of the committee, my name is Dan Kalb with the Union of Concerned Scientists. We also rise in opposition to this bill. A few quick points. One, the emission reductions required under AB 32 should this bill go into effect, would still be required under AB 32. And so if ARB was not allowed to implement a cap and trade program as part of their solution, their package of solutions, they would have to find those emission reductions somewhere else. And so it's not like you're not getting additional emission reductions. And so it's very likely that having more direct regulations to get those very same amount of emission reductions could be costlier. And that's why ARB decided in their package, in their suite of programs and measures to implement AB 32, they decided, well, they'll have a variety of regulatory measures, some that already existed, some that will be new, some that will be expanded, and then they'll supplement that with a cap and trade program as a least cost way to get the additional, the final package of emission reductions. I think roughly 20% of the overall scoping plan reductions are estimated to come from the cap and trade program. Also, this essentially allows decisions in other states to control what we do in California. It says if some of these other states nearby decide not to be part of this Western States program, and we think a Western States program would be a good idea, but if they decide not to, they essentially prevent California from moving forward. So it defers the power to make a decision to other states' policymakers. And I think that's a really bad idea and a bad precedent.
Thank you very much. Senator Lynch, let me just take any of the Me Too's, and we'll leave these two witnesses. Just stay put, folks, and we'll bring others forward. Any others who want to come forward to give their name, organization, if any, and their opposed position.
Josh Malone, California League of Conservation Voters, in opposition.
Thank you. Next witness.
Nidhi Baltista with the Coalition for Clean Air, also opposed.
Thank you.
Tim O'Connor, Environmental Defense Fund. I apologize we didn't get our opposed letter into the file, but we are opposed to the bill.
Thank you.
Tom Addison, Legislative Committee, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, in opposition.
Thank you.
And also Bonnie Holmes-Jen with the American Lung Association of California, also opposed.
Thank you. Do we have any other witnesses in opposition? If not, we'll ask these witnesses to stay put. Senator Runner, I think you had a question.
Just to follow up a little bit on the issue of the the other states and the ability to the issues of cap and trade and getting other trading partners in that process. Bring me up to speed. I don't know if you would have it or if the author would have it, and that is, which partners are left right now in the Western Climate Initiative?
You would probably have to get the definitive answer, you probably have to talk to one of the Undersecretary of Cali, PA, or the governor's office. So I couldn't give you a definitive answer. I do know that most of the states and provinces that were originally part of it, that was the largest number, are still part of it. But more work has to be done to move that forward to get an actual regional approach and regional program in place. But I believe most of them are still part of it, yeah, but not all.
I wonder if the author has a different.
The most recent that we have is that Arizona is votes to become an observer, not an active participant at this time. California obviously is active. Montana adopts the limits by executive order, but they have no cap and trade authority. New Mexico is going forward and limiting greenhouse gas emissions. WCI bill to require reporting offsets and clarity reduction program. It actually failed. There is a lawsuit in progress. Oregon explicit authority to do low carbon fuel standard, no explicit authority to do any cap or trade. Utah adopted limits by executive order, but no cap and trade. Washington rejected the WCI bill. The governor issued a climate change executive order, and they're currently looking at a low carbon fuel standard, but then again, no cap and trade at this time. British Columbia, I just know they're an active member. I don't know what they're doing on its way.
I guess part of my observation, and again, I was hearing more of those kinds of things, and that is, while they may be still partners, they have very limited. They have limited their involvements in terms of what they would be actively participating in, which is, again, not the intent of the original. It seemed to me, the original climate change initiative, being partners in this process. But it seems to me, at least from a couple of these, what I've heard is that they're reacting to the economic conditions right now. They're concerned about how this affects the current economics in their state. And as a result of that, they're wanting to step back. If California moves forward with a cap and trade on its own or with limited participants, do you believe that's better or worse for California businesses?
To move forward as part of the entire AB 32 plan, to have a portion of it, roughly 20%, to be cap and trade with possibly a couple other states nearby, you're saying, is that good or bad for business?
No, I'm asking if with a limited number, with fewer partners.
Right. Well,
is that good or bad to have limited partners?
I think the more partners, the better, as long as the partners have strong programs. I know no one has, as far as I could tell, has given up in the effort to include other partners. I do know also that AB 32 was put forward as a California law, right, and that it certainly was part of the thinking that if other states don't jump on board or follow suit, it's still important for California to move forward. I'll also remind the Senator that the emission reductions will have to come from somewhere as required under AB 32. If not cap and trade, they'll have to come from other new regulations that might even cost more to implement.
Right. And again, my question still, I think I heard you say that it would be better if you had more trading partners.
We support the idea of having other Western states involved.
Right. And I get that. And I also get the idea that certainly, there's a commitment to the goals and objectives of AB 32. I get that too, both from many of your organizations, many of the legislators obviously were a clear part of that vision and what they want to take place. I also understand, though, from the very beginning, there was a concern about the economic conditions that could be brought about. And in fact, original legislation has within it the idea of limiting implementation based upon the economic condition. So I'm observing these other states that are making some decisions based upon economic conditions, which then, at least in terms of what you've just said, could make it more difficult for California, with fewer partners, which then even enhances the challenges of California in the implementation of AB 32 without more partners.
I don't necessarily disagree with everything you said. I will remind all here that California is the 8th largest economy in the world.
Right.
We're a very large state, and wouldn't be odd for California to move forward by itself in this kind of program. I mean, if we were Rhode Island, that would never happen.
Yeah,
but we're California.
Part of our concern is we just don't want to slip to 9 or 10.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Sure.
Any other comments or questions, Senator? Other members of the committee?
I had a question, if I may.
Senator Pavlik.
This bill is a little bit puzzling to me because I'm not sure, Senator Dunn, do you prefer a federal cap-and-trade approach for climate policy?
I prefer California not to go alone. I don't think a cap-and-trade period, if you're really truly interested in helping to reduce greenhouse gases or improve air quality, cap-and-trade doesn't really do that. Cap-and-trade basically says you can keep polluting all you want, and this person over here, you can go ahead and buy some credits from them, but you can continue doing what you want. There's also been cases when there's been a lot of fraud, and so I just think it would be, and basically I came about with this because of a hearing that we had, an oversight hearing in energy, and Mary Nichols herself said that California should not really go on its own. And so that's what gave me the idea of the bill to begin with.
So you would prefer a federal approach?
I would prefer not to do cap and trade. If we're going to clean up the environment, let's clean it up. Cap and trade itself won't do that.
Then you would prefer a straight regulatory approach. Absolutely. With no market-based mechanisms?
Right.
No offsets, no
I think you're going to establish, if you're going to establish this program, this is what it is, and then you can reward them for achieving those objectives, but yeah. If you want to end up going that direction, I think that's bad for the economy too. If you don't be realistic, but that would be more that would be more honest than what this current program is.
Well, you know, AB 32.
But I'm just saying. By the way, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying this bill basically doesn't say not to do it. It just says California don't go alone. California do it as part of a larger group.
The language in AB 32 gives the authority to CARB to implement market-based mechanisms if they so choose. In fact, the language is very careful in there. It was may versus shall, and the language is may. They may do it, providing. So they always have the option. Some people, in fact, would prefer a straight regulatory approach. And so what was sort of puzzling, the people that advocated the market-based mechanisms were the business community.
AB 32 also provides in numerous spots that in the case of an economic hardship or crisis, that you can delay the implementation. And so far, I don't know what anybody thinks this is right now, but I consider this to be an economic hardship when our unemployment in the state of California is greater than what the national average is. We have an economic hardship. So there was a concern within AB 32 that it be done right and it be done in a way that makes economic sense. This won't make economic sense if you try to do it on its own. That's just my opinion, though. Take it for what it's worth.
I'll save my comments for closing.
All right. Senator Lowenthal, Senator Corbett? If not, then Senator Pavlik, I think if you have additional comments, this would be the time.
Are we closing time? Some of this discussion was directly relevant to when the California's Clean Car Law was passed back in 2002. They said California shouldn't go it alone. We were just one state out of 50. Why don't you wait till we have a federal policy? And then the same people that were opposing having cleaner, more fuel-efficient cars here were opposing any increase of CAFE standards on the federal government level. So it was sort of like a catch-22. One state shouldn't go it alone, but then people would oppose any federal action. So it took 26 years for any increase of the mile-per-gallon standards that were just announced last week. Well, one state did go alone on the clean cars, and 13 other states followed, and it created this sort of momentum, if you will. And as of last week, it's a federal standard, and the country of Canada just announced that they favor more fuel-efficient cars, reducing dependence on foreign oil and things like that. The reason the language in AB 32 was giving the option to CARB to implement market-based mechanisms, including allowances and offsets, was at the request primarily of the business community in providing incentives, if you will, for businesses that would exceed their reduction targets and be able to trade credits. It would be incentivizing them to do more than their fair share. There were many people that supported a strict regulatory approach, set a cap, require reductions, and so CARB is trying to find a way to create sending the right market signal to businesses. I think it's instructive that the support for this isn't among all those businesses that were testifying in favor of having market-based mechanisms. I know some who testified don't like auctions because they don't want to pay for pollution costs, but they want wide-open offsets in order to buy emissions credits from out of state. California theoretically could go it alone on a cap-and-trade program. It's something to be discussed. 38 million people. Canada has 32 million people. We wouldn't be having discussion on whether they can go it alone. And at least you could monitor offsets so they're real and verified if they're right here in California. But this is the discussion on whether or not CARB will go forward with a trading program. AB 32 required two things: mandatory reporting of significant emitters of greenhouse gas emissions, and it put a cap on emissions and rolled them back to 1990 levels, about a 25% reduction. It never required trading in it, and if you look at the timeline of AB 32 implementation in the bill itself, there's no timeline for putting trading. So this was suggested by the business community, and there is some models on this. RGGI, the New England states, have adopted a trading program, and those 5 states are smaller than one California, may I add, but in the utility sector that's working, and we've had it done on acid rain. It has to be, a cap-and-trade program has to be done well, and emissions reductions or offsets have to be real and permanent and verified, and that's all very important. I will not be supporting this bill today because it seems, just in my opinion, sort of creating a sort of a standard based on how many states get in or get out, and then they will fight a federal program from implementing it, which would be my preference, obviously, to have a national policy, which is coming forward. But creating innovative models here in our state that are cost-effective, keeping in mind what the cost would be to businesses. I've heard no one talk about allowances and 100% auctions required for all emitters. If there were any allowances to start out with, they would be minor in nature. And so some of these huge numbers and inflatable numbers are models based on the most expensive approach you could have, and I can't find anyone in the real world supporting that. So I was somewhat puzzled by this bill because many people are opposing the federal policy, as well as it was the business community itself who advocated for a cap-and-trade.
Thank you. Senator Lowenthal, did you have a comment or question after all?
Yeah, I want to follow up on that. It just is striking to me the juxtaposition between SB 960, which really questioned CARB's ability to do economic analyses, to deal with regulations and the real concern, and now a bill that says that when one of the major regulations that CARB is dealing with, or one of the major issues before CARB, enabling them to at least do 20%, not by regulation, by cap and trade of the emissions reductions, and you question that too. So you question cap and trade, you question their ability to do regulation. It just seems to me that really underlying this, you are questioning the Global Warming Solutions Act and whether we should be doing this at all. whether you say it's regulation or cap and trade. And for me, I'm willing to look at how we negotiate through that, but to eliminate or to what is existing state law and to say that you just really don't want to see, and I don't know if you're saying that, but it seems to me you are, that you are really, again, just questioning, not just because of the economic conditions, the very implementation of climate change legislation. It's an attempt to not engage in the implementation of this. I find difficult for myself to vote for a bill that would have that impact, and so with that, I cannot support this bill.
All right. Any other comments or questions before we let Senator Dutton close? Senator Dutton, I think the challenge of this conversation is that we've got half a dozen related issues stacked up on top of one another. We've got folks who have one point of view or another about climate change, and then folks who've got one point of view or another about how, if at all, to deal with climate change, what the suite of options or tools available could be, should be. Then we've got folks who've got a point of view about cap and trade, and I think you've raised an interesting and important conversation today in terms of the efficacy of cap and trade, which is a debate that's going to continue beyond this state capitol in my observation. And then really the nub of the question for today is whether or not, whatever we might think is ideal, whether or not we'd be willing to limit the potential for the use of this particular tool in the way that you've suggested. And on that particular point, I just can't get there. So I'm not going to be able to support you on this one either, I'm afraid, today. But why don't we go ahead and let you close, and then we'll ask for a motion on the bill.
Let me clarify some things. No, I voted against AB 32, and the reason why I voted against it was because I was concerned about the way it would be implemented. I didn't trust the process going forward, and that was the reason why. And in this building, in the history of California, we've seen that happen time and time again, that when good intentions on the part of the legislature to pass something that they felt in principle was good and solid, what ends up happening by the time it gets done, with the regulators get done with it, it turns out to be less than desirable. And that's where my concern is here. Although I didn't support it, okay, the fact of the matter is it still won't stop me from trying to figure out a way to make it better. Okay, because I am a small business person of California. For 40 years I operated a small business here in California, and so I have a pretty good feeling about how they think. And I can tell you right now that this particular case here, when you talk about the relationships of the two, yeah, I do think there should be independent review. When I have a review done on something, I want to know the facts. I want to know the truth, because I'm getting ready to make a personal financial investment. So I need to have it be impartial. I can't have it be tainted towards one point of view or the other. With regards to cap and trade, it's not saying not do it. It's just saying, hey, don't have California go on its own, because everything that I've been told by supposedly the experts in doing cap and trade is that the bigger the field, the better. Okay, and if you continue down this plight of having California be the guinea pig, you're just going to prolong this recession even longer. But that's the majority, for the majority party to make a determination of. This here is a modest requirement on CARB. It's something that Mary Nichols herself said, that California should not go it alone. Cap and trade, based on their accounts, even though I don't necessarily agree with their analysis, only accounts for 20% of the reductions identified in the scoping plan itself. It's certainly a reasonable, modification to the cap and trade plan. So with that, I would still request a aye vote, knowing that I'm not going to get it. Thank you.
We have a motion. Call the roll.
Simidian?
Simidian, no.
Simidian, no. Runner? Aye. Runner, aye. Corbett?
No.
Corbett, no. Hancock? Lowenthal?
No.
Lowenthal, no. Pavley?
No.
Pavley, no. Strickland?
Aye.
Strickland, aye. That's 2 yes and 4 no.
Senator Dutton, you have 2 aye votes, 4 no votes. We have one member who we know is absent today. I'm going to announce the vote as 2 aye, 4 no. That measure fails, and we'll close the roll. And then I'd like to lift the call on your previous measure, which was SB 960, since we do have a full complement other than the absent member today. Please call the absent members. And
Corbett?
Senator Runner, if you could stay for one, excuse the interruption. Senator Runner, if you could stay for the consent calendar. Thank you. I knew that word would come to me. I would appreciate it. Call the roll on SB 960, please.
Corbett? No. Corbett, no. Hancock? Strickland? Aye. Strickland, aye. That's 2 yes and 4 no.
Ayes, yes. Ayes 2, noes 4. That measure fails. Reconsideration is, of course, granted on both measures without objection. And then on the consent calendar, members, thank you, Senator Dutton. We have 2 items on the consent calendar, file item 11 and agenda item 12. Again, that's item number 11, SB 1456, Semidian, and then item number 12 is SB 1477, which is a committee bill. Could we get a motion on the consent calendar? Motion by Senator Runner. Call the roll on the consent calendar, please.
Semidian?
Aye.
Semidian, aye. Runner? Aye. Runner, aye. Corbett? Aye. Corbett, aye. Hancock? Lowenthal?
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Pavley? Aye. Pavley, aye. Strickland? Aye. Strickland, aye. That's 6 yes.
Ayes 6, noes 0. Consent calendar is approved. Senator Oropeza, welcome. As I mentioned earlier, unfortunately, Senator Hancock is away today on a medical leave, and we have 2 items, I believe, of yours to be heard.
Yes,
SB 1052 and then SB 1326. Let's go ahead and start with SB 1052, if you would, please, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and members. This bill does 2 things. First, it requires that each state agency report annually on their handling of e-waste, and 2, it streamlines the oversight of the disposal of e-waste. We're definitely now moving from a macro conversation to a micro conversation in terms of the committee's discussion. This measure is based on a California State Auditor report, which is conducted and reported in 2008, that state agencies don't consistently report the amount of e-waste they're diverting from municipal landfills or dispose of e-waste improperly. A recent investigation done by Cal Watchdog confirms that e-waste is still being disposed of improperly by state agencies. The problem is traceable to a lack of communication and knowledge among the agencies. Additionally, the auditor found that DSG's reporting of e-waste disposal has been infrequent and inconsistent. My bill will address these problems by requiring DGS to work with state agencies to more accurately track the amounts of e-waste they generate, recycle, and discard. It also requires the ultimate oversight of e-waste by one specific agency, and that would be the Department of Toxic Substance Control per the auditor's recommendation. Finally, I'd like to note that we have worked with the committee to implement these changes in a fiscally responsible manner, and I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Thank you very much, Senator. Witnesses in support? Quickly, please. And Senator, I'm not aware of any opposition on this bill. Are you?
Nor am I.
All right. Then we'll ask your witness to be brief.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa, representing Californians Against Waste. We supported a similar bill last year, AB 903, by Assemblymember Chesbro, that passed this committee as well. Since February 2006, the Department of Toxic Substances Control has banned a wide variety of electronic consumer devices from disposing in the landfill. These e-waste devices contain toxins such as mercury, lead, cadmium, and iron, copper, nickel.
I'm going to guess that the committee members are finding you very persuasive, and thank you for your testimony, and ask if there are any other witnesses in support. And if not, are there any witnesses in opposition? And if not, Senator, would you like to close?
Request an aye vote.
And is there a motion?
I'll move that bill.
Motion by Senator Corbett. Call the roll.
Semidian?
Aye.
Semidian, aye. Runner?
This is as amended, members.
Corbett?
Aye.
Corbett, aye. Hancock? Lowenthal?
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Pavley?
Aye.
Pavley, aye. Strickland?
No.
Strickland, no. That's 4 yes, 1 no.
That's 4 yes, 1 no. You have sufficient. I'm going to hold the roll open so that absent members may vote. That's as amended. And as I anticipated, your witness was very effective. Thank you very much.
She was. I was terribly impressed, and I'm very grateful for her support.
Thank you. Let's move on to your next item, Senator Oropeza, which is SB 1326.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This bill appropriates a total of $30 million to local conservation corps to recycle e-waste and tires. This will infuse into our neighborhoods and communities an immediate source of job creation and cleanup of our neighborhoods by recycling items that would otherwise be destined for landfills. Today, there are over 3,000 young people waiting to join the Conservation Corps. This bill would provide 1 million hours of job training and education to at-risk youths, in addition to recycling over. The current numbers for the local conservation corps is that they have recycled over 25,000 pounds of e-waste and removed over 150,000 pounds of debris. This will only be increased exponentially by the adoption of this measure, and we are intending to continue to work with the state conservation corps. Our intent is to have these resources go to the local conservation corps to the greatest extent possible.
All right, thank you. Witnesses in support. Before we hear from them, let's go to Senator Lowenthal.
Yeah, could you elaborate, while you spoke earlier about the need to support local conservation corps, the bill, I think, talks about the California Conservation Corps. And then you said to the greatest extent possible.
Right.
You'd like to make sure that there was some equitable distribution of 50-50.
That's correct.
Where does that stand, and why is that not in the bill now?
Because we continue to work with the state Conservation Corps on coming to an agreement on the apportionment, and would like to do that in a way that finds a positive response downstairs.
What I'd like to say is that I am very supportive of the bill and will support the bill today, but if it is not worked out and local conservation corps do not receive any of the money, I will rethink my support of the bill, Senator.
Thank you, and I appreciate that very much.
Senator Oropeza, so the understanding is everybody wants to be equitable. We're just not clear yet what equitable means.
In a nutshell, Mr.
Great.
Chair.
Witness.
Thank you, Chair and members. Reed Addis on behalf of the California Association of Local Conservation Corps. In strong support today, we appreciate the Senator's leadership on this issue. It does in fact allow $1 million in job training and work for the local conservation corps. It takes surplus dollars one time, injects that into the corps, and the corps are able to get out within a matter of weeks and get jobs on the ground. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any other witnesses in support? Do we have witnesses in opposition? If you'd come forward, please. And Mr. Addis, we can ask you to make way for our witnesses in opposition. We'll let you back if need be.
Thank you, Chairman and committee members. Terry Lavelle with the California Tire Dealers Association. Our association members are the ones that collect the tire fee that make up the tire recycling management fund that fund the tire programs in the state. We support the bill in concept, but we would like to carve out the section dealing with the $5 million that comes from the tire fund. We feel that that is way too much money for a program that the state has done very successfully, and that is the eradication of all the major tire piles in the state of California. This is thanks to Senator Escuchia's bill in 2000 that committed $6.5 million a year for 7 years, and to this date, there's one small tire pile up in Sonoma that needs to be cleaned out. Now, that doesn't mean that there's tire piles arising in vacant lots and ravines every now and then. Currently, the former Waste Management Board, which is now Cal Recycle, has a program for grants to cities and counties to clean up those small tire piles, 100 tires here or a dozen tires there. And they also have the Tire Amnesty Day program that allows citizens to come and drop off their tires without having to pay a disposal fee. While we support the intent of the legislation, we support the Conservation Corps and the Youth Conservation and the local conservation districts and their projects. we feel that this one little portion of the bill probably needs to be worked on. And we've got some ideas as to how to expand the Cal Recycle's use of the the local conservation corps. And we'd be willing to work with the senator and senator staff on that. But at this point, we have to oppose unless amended. Thank you.
Thank you. Next witness.
Thank you very much. My name is Catherine Brandenburg, and I'm with the Flanagan Law Firm representing the Institute of Scrap Recycling Industries.
Ms. Brandenburg, if you pull that microphone just a little closer, please. Thank you.
Thank you. I do not believe there is anyone in this room who doesn't support the Corps. It's a very worthwhile program, but we unfortunately must oppose this bill due to the fact that any Corps member, and there's currently 8 local Corps right now, have applied and do receive funding from the e-waste program. And to just go and provide $25 million to the Corps through a grant program is really not good public policy. We saw a lot of issues, or we have seen a lot of issues through the bottle bill program where money has been taken out because there have been additional extra funding. And the way that the program, the e-waste program is set up is Cal Recycle has the ability, and they do not have to go to the legislature, they can adjust the fee that the consumer pays currently. They have adjusted at one time when they felt that more money is needed in the fund to make sure that all the electronic waste that is collected and recycled is the money is appropriated properly. They have, I believe, realized that they have a little too much in the fund, so funding will come back down. They'll probably make another, I would assume, another change in the adjustment of the fee that is charged to the consumer, within the next year or two. So our big concern is that we do not start taking money from a fund just to pay for another very worthwhile program. It's not the right course to take and not the right path. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Do we have other witnesses? And let me just see, how many other witnesses in opposition do we have on this item? Go right ahead.
Just me.
And I'm going to go ahead and allow 15 to 30 seconds if you've got a different point to be made than has already been heard, because I know we have multiple stakeholders here. It's not just a pro or con debate.
Thank you for that, Mr. Chairman. Kathy Van Osten, Rosenkindle, representing Tech America. In addition to the comments that were made before, what we want to just try to drive home here is that part of the problem that we've seen with the bottle bill is that there were surplus funds, there was a precedent set, they've been borrowed, and now we're still struggling to try to fix that program. It is my understanding that there are local Corps that do receive these funds through the competitive performance-based grant cycle. Obviously, we support the California Conservation Corps, but we do feel that this is a program that was established to place an assessment on products that are sold to assist in the recovery and either recycling or proper disposal of those products, and to take those fees and then apply it for, again, a worthwhile program, but nevertheless not exactly what was originally intended, sets up a precedent that can be troubling.
Thank you for your comments. Any other witnesses in opposition? All right, then back to the committee. Senator Oropeza, would you like to comment at all on any of those?
Just very briefly to say that the fund that is being referenced here, the e-waste fund, has sufficient funds for the competitive process that was referenced by the opponents as being their concern about the competitive process being able to continue. This is taking a portion of the funds, but certainly not the lion's share of the funds that are available to do work that needs to be done. There's e-waste out there. It needs to be disposed of. This is the Conservation Corps is trained on how to do that, and this is a good addition to the programs that are run through contractors in the private sector.
All right, then. Comments or questions from members of the committee? Senator, I think this is a classic on the one hand, on the other hand. On the one hand, you heard everyone support the value of trying to put the Corps to work, particularly at this particular time, and you've chosen programs that are specific to the fees. I think that's, as it should be. On the other hand, I think people have a concern that what's supposed to be a fee-driven program has the potential to morph into a jobs program that may become increasingly unrelated to its primary purposes. And I did take the point that was made, which is when the fee is variable, it's a little harder than when it's fixed to say, well, we have a surplus in the account. So I think, my own view as a member of the committee would be I want to support the bill today.
Thank you.
Wish you well going forward. I do think, however, that we ought to sort of put a stake in the ground today and say one time only means one time only. Doesn't mean that there won't be a second time, but it also means that this is not a precedent going forward. I do think the concerns that people have raised about sort of finding ourselves wandering down that path without being mindful of it are legitimate concerns to be raised. So,
I concur, Mr.
great.
Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? And if not, it would be time for a motion unless there's a further close. Motion is?
Move the bill.
Move the bill. Thank you. Call the roll.
Simitian.
Aye.
Simitian, aye. Runner. Corbett.
Aye.
Corbett, aye. Hancock. Lowenthal.
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Pavley.
Aye.
Pavley, aye. Strickland.
No.
Strickland, no. We have 4 yes, 1 no.
4 yes, 1 no. You have sufficient votes, but I'm going to hold the roll open so that absent members may add on if they wish. Thank you very much to you.
Thank
and
you
your
very
witnesses.
much, Mr. Chair and members.
All right. Thank you. All right. Senator Correa. That brings us to agenda item number 3, SB 1010. Senator Correa, welcome. Let me ask you, Senator, a couple of questions before you begin about how you would like to proceed. If this bill looks familiar, it's because it is. I believe we saw a twin during the special session, if I remember correctly. Yes?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
And we had some conversation at that time about the possibility of amendments, but apparently that has not been the case. We had an extensive discussion that day. What is your preference today in terms of additional discussion on what is essentially an unchanged bill? Do you want to hold the bill over? Would you like a vote today, up or down? How would you like to proceed? Do you think we need to revisit those issues? I am mindful of the committee's time, but also of your rights as an author to be heard on your bill, sir.
Mr. Chair, I'm also mindful of the committee's time. What I would like to do is make some very brief remarks. I think my principal co-author, Mr. Dave Cogdell, I'm not sure if he's here, but I know he wanted to make some comments as well. So I'd like to do that, make some comments, and then have a vote on the bill.
Sure. All right. Welcome, and proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you've said, this bill, a very similar bill, has been heard before by this committee recently, and the goal of this bill is really to strike a winning balance between environmental safeguarding concerns and moving projects that are essentially noteworthy of moving forward, meaning a set of projects that will create a number of good-paying jobs in the state of California, and projects that will essentially help alleviate the severe unemployment rate that we have today in the state of California. As all of us know, today in this country and the state, we're experiencing the most severe economic downturn since the Great Depression. A lot of our constituents are out of work, losing their homes, jeopardizing their family's future. And the goal, again, of this bill is essentially get people back to work as quickly as possible. That being in mind, I would open it up for Mr. Cogdell here.
Okay. I know this is an administration-sponsored bill. Does the administration want to speak to these issues again? All right. Thank you. I'm going to try and split the difference, and we'll see how this works. Are there witnesses in support who have something new to offer which was not offered at the last hearing on an identical bill in the special session? All right. Are there witnesses in opposition who have something new to offer that was not offered in the last hearing on an identical bill in the special session? All right. Then I'm going to thank you all for your honesty on that one. and perhaps prompt the committee and the chair to similar restraint. Are there comments or questions from members of the committee on this item before we put the matter to a vote and ask for a motion? All right, we have a motion from Senator Strickland. Senator, I'm going to ask you to hold that motion for one moment, only to say, Senator, I'm disappointed. We had talked about the possibility of some amendments forthcoming at the last time. I understand that ultimately you've come back with the same bill, and I know you're working with the sponsor in the administration. There were, I think, legitimate important issues that were teased out in the previous conversation. But again, the substantive concerns that I and others raised with the bill and the lack of any practical recourse to any decision made by a lead agency, both on the merits of the project and on the environmental issues, have not been addressed since the bill remains unamended. And so it's on that basis that I'll be casting my vote today.
And if I may.
Please.
To the chair. If I may add, in addition to what you've just said, I also, last time the twin bill was heard, I also offered those in opposition to come up with some suggested amendments that would alleviate their concerns, and no such suggestions have been forthcoming as well.
All right. Disappointment all around. That leaves us with a motion by Senator Strickland to approve the bill.
If I may.
I apologize. We're going to ask it once again. Thank you for your courtesy to hold that. Let me go back to Senator Correa. Okay, now to Senator Pavley.
No, I just felt like I should say something before I vote here. I favor an expedited review if needed, for especially for infrastructure projects that are facing potential loss of stimulus dollars or unique circumstances along the way. I'm certainly supportive of going in that direction. I'm very concerned, though, about losing the ability to mitigate adverse environmental impacts and sort of not a lot of criteria on arbitrarily selecting which 25 projects get to move to the front of the line, and how we would enforce any kind of mitigation measures. And as a former local government official, I'm concerned when we're trying to deal with traffic impacts or other things that are caused by sort of circumventing the CEQA process, if you will, that may not be in the best long-term interests of the state to sort of pick and choose projects as we go. But if there are some unique circumstances on particular projects that are facing loss of stimulus dollars or other things, I want to hear about those, and I would be welcome to looking at them with an open mind.
All right, Senator Lowenthal.
I just wanted to follow up. I was not going to say anything, but why waste an opportunity to say something? The last year, we had seen an NFL stadium bill that came before the legislature, which removed the judicial review process that was already ongoing. All the folks there said this would not be precedent. We would not be eliminating judicial review for CEQA process, and yet now we're back to having 125 projects potentially, which would remove the judicial review. So with that, I think it is precedent setting, and I think not only would we see these bills, but every developer who had the resources would come before us and to seek to remove judicial review. I cannot support that, and I would support if you wanted to raise issues about the whole process of judicial review and the level, as I pointed out to you even before when you just that what is the level for redress in the courts. That's one issue that could be a discussion item, but just to seek to remove the ability of major projects from having that review, I think is unacceptable, and with that I cannot support the bill.
Thank you. Senator Correa, one last word before we let Mr. Strickland finally get that motion on the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My last word would be to address some of the comments made by the members of your committee, if I may. Mr. Lowenthal, as I recollect, the stadium issue was not judicial exemptions post-CEQA. I think that stadium was exemption from CEQA altogether. That was way, way out there compared to what I'm asking here. And I'm glad to hear you say that you're interested in some process of, judicial review that maybe would, shorten the time, which is something I'm willing to work on, and I think that's logical to do something of the sort. And I'd love to go in that direction. With that being said, I look forward to working on these issues. Again, the goal of this author is to move these projects move them ahead quickly. When we talk about, Ms. Pavley, the front of the line, I'm not sure that there is a line, and as I stated in the first bill, if people are not happy with the Secretary of Business, Transportation, and Housing being the decision maker, we come up with another way of choosing these projects. But again, it's about getting Californians back to work. It's about jobs, jobs, jobs. After I presented the first bill here, it was interesting. I had some very well-known environmentalists privately come up to me and say, we have some major environmental projects here that are stuck because of the judicial review. Big solar farms that are stuck because of the litigation. And they were saying they wanted to move these to advance environmental goals. So we have the interesting catch-22. I would conclude by saying this is jobs, jobs, jobs. This is what this bill is about. I ask for an aye vote.
Senator Strickland.
Well, the reason why I moved the bill is I want to thank the author as well as Senator Cogdill for moving forward. I mean, right now our unemployment rate is the highest it's been since the Great Depression, and I think the number 1, 2, and 3 priority should be jobs among both sides of the aisle. I hope this sets a precedent that we put people back to work should be the precedent that this legislature has in terms of importance. And that's why I made my motion to move this bill, because I think it's important to move these projects forward and put people back to work.
All right. Motion by Strickland. Call the roll.
Simitian?
Simitian, no.
Simitian, no. Runner? Corbett? No. Corbett, no. Hancock? Lowenthal? No. Lowenthal, no. Pavley?
No.
Pavley, no. Strickland?
Aye.
Strickland, aye. That's 1 yes, 4 no.
1 yes, 4 no. We're short, but we're going to hold the roll open for absent members.
Mr. Chair, we'll keep that on hold. Hope spring is eternal.
We'll keep that. We'll hold the roll open, and we'll note and applaud the discipline that the potential witnesses exhibited in contrast to the chair and the committee members. So thank you all for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senators.
All right. Senator Corbett. We're waiting on Senator Leno, who I believe is stuck in a meeting. Thank you.
Numerical order. So would you prefer?
Senator Corbett, your first item, I believe, is SB 1100, Product Stewardship, Household Batteries. Yes?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. You'll be happy to know that this is a bill that can create jobs. You'll be happy to know that this is a bill that can help our local governments avoid tens of millions of dollars of costs that they currently pay for recycling batteries. SB 1100 will require extended producer responsibility for all household batteries. Specifically, the bill will require battery manufacturers to design, fund, and operate a stewardship program to properly manage batteries in order to sell their products in California. SB 1100 will also require battery manufacturers to meet collection goals each year and report data to the Department of Resources Recycling and Recovery, who will oversee the implementation of each manufacturer's stewardship plan. Extended producer responsibility requires manufacturers to create their own product stewardship plans. The plans give flexibility to producers on how to deal with the end of life for their products while harmonizing California's recycling efforts with other national and international programs that have been very successful, I might add. Product stewardship will not only make recycling more convenient for consumers, it will also create incentives for manufacturers to design safer products that have less environmental impacts. Household batteries cost local governments in California tens of millions of dollars each year. Both Europe and Canada have successful EPR programs for household batteries that have reduced costs to local governments and created jobs collecting and recycling the batteries, including the important elements that can be reused at the end of life of these batteries, so therefore helping the environment. California can do the same. I would like to introduce a few witnesses I have with me today. Justin Mallon from StopWaste.org, who is the sponsor of the bill, and also Heidi Sanborn, who's here from the California Product Stewardship Council to testify in support of the bill. And I know I have a witness here in today, too, that is in the business of recycling, who might be able to answer questions on this as well.
Great. If we can, again, go with 2 witnesses for 2 minutes, and then just introduction and position. And I'll let the senator sort out who the first two witnesses are.
Mr. Chair, Justin Malone, on behalf of Stop Waste, the sponsor, I'd like to yield my time to the 2 experts here.
All right. We'll use you as a resource. Please.
Good afternoon, Chair and members. My name is Heidi Sanborn. I'm the Executive Director of the California Product Stewardship Council. We're a new nonprofit. We formed in 2006 in direct relationship to the disposal bans on universal waste, batteries being one of those product types. You will see several bills this year on product stewardship related to these items: fluorescent lamps, propane tanks, sharps, and other very expensive products that are 100% banned from disposal, which results in an unfunded mandate on local governments, and we do not have the capacity to respond. The questions really are, what is the proper role of government versus the private sector for managing end-of-life product waste? And we believe that the role of government should be limited to enforcement and oversight, and the private sector role should be to design and fund the collection system. This will reduce the cost of the taxpayers and the garbage ratepayers and bring the private sector competition to bear to incentivize product design changes that will reduce the end-of-life management costs for batteries. California local governments are currently paying up to $2,500 a ton to manage batteries, and we're at best capturing 5%, so it's an extraordinarily expensive and ineffective program. Also, producers-financed and managed battery recycling has been implemented for years in Europe and is now rolling out in Canada. And in fact, I brought a copy of a report that was proposed to the British Columbia government on behalf of the Rechargeable Battery Recycling Corporation. They operate in North America, and they proposed and have been selected as stewards, battery manufacturers, to collect all batteries in British Columbia, and they start that program July 1st of this year. We applaud that industry leadership, and we look forward to seeing that and encourage this kind of leadership in California. In fact, we actually partnered with Del Norte County and the RBRC program to try and test that in California. So for Del Norte County, we actually increased collection of batteries 3,000% by simply adding alkaline batteries to their existing program. So local governments, and that, 3,000%. And local governments continue to hope for the statewide solution through the bill. The industry has not been very supportive to date, and we've already seen one county pass an ordinance with mandatory retail take-back. We're afraid we're going to see more those type ordinances if we do not see a statewide solution, because the costs are so high and they need to cut costs in their household hazardous waste programs. So we urge your support for the bill.
Thank you for your comments. Next witness.
Good afternoon. My name is Todd Coy. I'm the Executive Vice President of a company named Kinspersky Brothers. I am here today in support of Bill 1100. Kinspersky Brothers is a permitted battery recycling company located in Anaheim, California. We have facilities in British Columbia, Canada, as well as in Columbus, Ohio. Combined, we employ over 200 people, 90 of which are in California. Our group companies collect, manage, and process over 42,000 tons of batteries per year. Last year, we collected 1.4 million pounds of primary single-use dry cell alkaline batteries. I'm not here today to talk about the issues of toxics or whether or not batteries should or should not be disposed of in solid waste. In California, that issue has been resolved. Batteries are hazardous waste in California, and as so, they must be handled as such. I am here instead to offer our support to state legislatures, battery manufacturers, local governments, and industry to assist in the development of a stewardship program that can be done effectively, efficiently, and with as little impact as possible to the citizens and businesses of California. With that being said, a successful collection and management program cannot be done without the support and effort of all the parties involved. Our support of Senate Bill 1100 is born from multiple areas, and not the least withstanding is the risk that if a stewardship program cannot be developed and designed and implemented by industry, of which I include the recyclers, then we may face a multitude of local ordinances and policies that would result in a patchwork of required collection programs throughout cities, counties, and towns in California, each potentially with their own unique requirements. This could have a negative impact on our own battery programs and activities within the state. We are advocating a single program within the state of California, one that could be developed in cooperation with industry and would hopefully not be so onerous that would preclude companies from growing and expanding sales and business opportunities in California. Such a program would need to be safeguarded against bureaucratic growth and done with adequate oversight, but without the development of a new agency or exaggerated costs to battery producers, municipalities, retail outlets, and last but not least, California citizens.
Last but not least was a good place to stop, if you could, please. Thank you. Other witnesses in support, with your name, your organization, if any, and your support position, please.
Margaret Gladstein on behalf of the California Retailers Association in support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Victoria Rome with Natural Resources Defense Council in support.
Next witness.
Leslie Daniel, Sierra Club, California, support.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Steve Wallach on behalf of the City and County of San Francisco in support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Mr. Chairman, members, Paul Smith with the Regional Council of Rural Counties, also on behalf of the California State Association and Counties, in strong support of the bill.
Thank you. Next witness.
Mr. Chairman and members, Dane Wadley on behalf of the League of California Cities in support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Pam Palitz from Environment California in support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Rachel Ostra on behalf of Recology in support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Teresa Bui on behalf of Californians Against Waste in support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Thank you.
Nidia Bautista on behalf of Coalition for Clean Air in support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Lori Chen with Clean Water Action in support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Mark Aprea on behalf of Republic Services in support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Okay.
Gretchen Lee Salter on behalf of the Breast Cancer Fund in strong support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Do we have witnesses in opposition? Well, we ask our witnesses in support to step away just to make room for the witness in opposition, and we'll bring you back if need be. And again, if we can ask a couple of you to take no more than 2 minutes, and then after that we'll take Me Too's. Welcome.
Mr. Chairman and members, Ralph Simoni representing the National Electrical Manufacturers Association. Let me just take a moment to describe to you what we're to create a distinction between battery types. All of us have cell phones or PDAs, whatever. These have rechargeable batteries, as do power tools, as do our laptop computers. These batteries have bad stuff in them. There's cadmium. Some are small sealed lead acid batteries. Others are lithium ion. In recognition of that, the industry has established since the late 1990s a national voluntary program where you can go on the website, find Home Depots, Radio Shacks, wherever. Senator Pavley, when she was in the Assembly, was involved in this issue as well. So essentially, the industry voluntarily has set up a nationwide program that is truly the essential EPR program that the Senator Corbett is attempting to set up. On the other hand, we have alkaline batteries. These are the ones that power remote control devices, flashlights, etc. These batteries don't have bad stuff in them. The industry used to put in mercury many, many years ago. That was taken out in the mid-1990s. There was legislation by Assemblyman Margolin, I believe Senator McCorkadale. So that is done. All you have is zinc and manganese and an electrolyte solution in these batteries. Interestingly, batteries are only 0.005% of the solid waste stream, and that's by weight. They are not recycled. They are collected. There is no can-to-can, closed-loop situation that goes on with batteries. They are either sent to Pennsylvania or Colorado once collected, or excuse me, Pennsylvania or Ohio, where they're put into an electric arc furnace and used for iron ore purposes, or they're sent up to Canada. So this isn't recycling. This is remediation of a product that doesn't cause a problem in the landfill. The last point I'd like to make is science. There is no science that has ever been put forward that these batteries are harmful in a landfill. The industry has done 2 studies, a worldwide literature search, nothing turned up bad. They've also done, through the University of Hamburg in Germany, just within the past year, a simulated landfill study called a lysimeter study. I have the results. If anybody's interested, no problem.
Thank you for your testimony. Next witness.
Kathy Van Austin, Rosenkindle, representing Tech America. Without repeating what Ralph just talked about, the voluntary program that the industry has put together not only has resources available for consumers to let them know where they can find sites to drop off their rechargeable batteries, it also includes an education component. To let consumers know about the programs that are available. This includes radio, print, television campaigns, really to make sure that consumers understand the impact of the rechargeable batteries and what they can do in terms of getting them either recycled or just returned. So just wanted to drive that point home. We are unfortunately opposed. We think the idea is a good one, but it's been done. We've done it voluntarily.
All right, thank you. Are there any other witnesses in opposition who have just name, organization, and position, please?
Lori Nelson, Consumer Specialty Products Association. We're opposed.
Thank you.
Mike Rogie, California Manufacturers and Technology Association, in opposition.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in opposition? All right, that brings it back to the committee. Comments or questions from members of the committee?
I just needed a point of clarification. Did Mr. Simone say the alkaline batteries that he was alluding to didn't fall into the dangerous, toxic category like cadmium and others that are...
I'm going to let Mr. Simone tell you what he said.
Might I?
In a short version of what you said. You were explaining the differences and
said they were bad.
The reason that alkaline batteries have been given a status as universal hazardous waste is because the DTSC applied the waste extraction test, where they actually take the battery apart, remove the metal jacket, other things, put the contents in an equal amount of water, and it's determined that it had an elevated pH or corrosivity level. That study really has nothing to do with simulating how randomly disposed batteries in a landfill react in a landfill.
Okay.
So
I just wanted to...
That's
so
how we ended up...
DTSC...
It's totally a creature of regulatory
Thank you.
frameworks.
Thank you.
Wanted to...
All right. Other comments or questions from members of the committee? Senator Corbett, if you'd like to respond to any things you heard and close, and then we'll ask for a motion after you're closed.
Well, I would just briefly respond that DTSC does consider these a waste that needs special treatment because the alkaline batteries have failed the bioassay tests. And so I think there may be some dispute on the fact that these are dangerous products.
Senator, if you could pull the microphone a little bit closer,
yes.
please. Thank
I was just stating that DTSC does, in fact, qualify these as a waste that does need special handling because of their corrosive characteristics and because of the fact that they do fail bioassay tests. And that's, I think, a pretty good indicator of the problem with these batteries. And with regard to the voluntary program, I think it's very important to note that clearly local governments wouldn't be paying tens of millions of dollars to track these wastes if, in fact, the voluntary program was working well. And I think it's only about a 17% success rate at this point. So we're trying to do something about that to make sure that we have a better program to make sure that these wastes are handled in a way that they should be. And I think when communities are struggling to make a decision as to whether they would be able to add another police officer or keep a library open because of the costs that they are trying to manage and keep up with because of these wastes, that a program that does allow people to do the right thing and recycle their batteries, and those batteries then, the components of those batteries then can be used for put to good use. I think that this is is a pretty good program. So that would be my closing. I think the measure speaks for itself. We avoid costs, we do something good for the environment, and we allow the ability to build more jobs, as a matter of fact, here in the state of California in the recycling of these batteries. And I do believe my witnesses might have a few comments they want to make in response to some of the opposition comments.
All right.
I can just mention that I do a lot of work for local governments, and I go into stores to actually see how these programs are being implemented. And I would say a good 30 to 40% of the stores that I go into today still do not have an RBRC box out, do not have any public education. People don't know it's there. And so that's why when we added alkaline batteries and we went to all the retailers in Del Norte County, we made sure the box was there and everything was visible and the public was educated. They loved it, and we increased the collection by 3,000% in 9 months. So I think that speaks volumes to the lack of implementation and collection that we're getting today and what could happen under a stewardship program.
All right. Are we ready for a motion? We are. We have a motion by Senator Lowenthal. Call the roll.
Simitian.
Aye.
Simitian, aye. Runner. Corbett.
Aye.
Corbett, aye. Hancock. Lowenthal.
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Pavley.
Aye.
Pavley, aye. Strickland.
No.
Strickland, no. 4 yes, 1 no.
Senator, you have sufficient votes, but I'm going to hold the roll open so that absent members can add on before the meeting comes to an end.
Thank you.
Thank you. You have one other item before us
I
today.
do.
SB 1365. This is agenda item number 8. And witnesses would come forward before the senator begins. And Senator, I'm not aware of any opposition on this bill. Senator Corbett, are you aware of any opposition on the bill?
No.
All right. Let's ask your witnesses to be brief, please, and let's see if we can move right along.
So briefly, Mr. Chair and members, SB 1365 will allow the Department of Toxic Substance Control to enforce our toy safety laws and even a much better way. This is a common sense approach to enhance the success of our toy safety laws. DTSC currently has sworn peace officers who enforce our lead and jewelry laws and work to protect us from hazardous waste. DTSC has worked to pull jewelry with lead off store shelves all over the state, protecting consumers from lead's dangerous effects. In addition, DTSC has events where consumers can test their toys and make sure they are safe. SB 1365 will ease the constraints on these very same peace officers to keep us safe from dangerous toys. SB 1365 requires DTSC to use existing resources to enforce toy safety laws, thereby not increasing state costs under this bill. DTSC has an active enforcement team that already does testing in stores. And in addition, DTSC will be able to recuperate costs as part of this enforcement program through penalties that would be paid by those that are in violation of our very important toy safety laws. By expanding DTSC's authority to enforce these laws, they will be able to expand their enforcement actions and protect consumers from these toxic toys. And also this will help restore consumers' confidence when they are shopping, to know that they have toys, they have the opportunity to buy products on our shelves that are safe for their children.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator, it's my understanding that there's a small amendment can be taken in committee that you've agreed to, which just clarifies that no one would be essentially double tagged for the same offense. Is that correct? All right, thank you. Then with that understanding, witnesses in support?
Hi, my name is Pam Palitz, and I'm the Environmental Health Advocate and Staff Attorney for Environment California. Toxic chemicals do not belong in toys. I don't think I'll get a lot of argument about that. California has been a leader in the movement to improve toy safety. In fact, when we banned phthalates in children's toys, Senator Feinstein took that our statewide ban, took it and inserted it into the federal Consumer Product Safety Improvement Act. DTSC is already enforcing the ban on lead in children's jewelry. In those same stores that are carrying the jewelry, they also carry toys. It certainly makes sense for DTSC to be able to pull toys off the shelves the same time that they're pulling the jewelry off the shelves to test it. This is a situation where DTSC is willing to take on an additional task for no additional resources, and for that reason it would seem to make sense to support it. Thank you.
Additional support?
Bill Alio for Environmental Working Group. We support the bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other witnesses in support of the bill who would like to come forward? Give us your name, your organization, if any, and your support position, please.
Leslie Daniel, Sierra Club, California. We're in support.
Thank you very much. Next witness.
Lori Chen with Clean Water Action in support.
Thank you. Any other witnesses in support? Do we have any witnesses in opposition? Do we have any comments or questions from members of the committee? We have a motion by Senator Strickland. Call the roll.
Simitian?
Aye.
Simitian, aye. Runner? No. Runner, no. Corbett?
Aye.
Corbett, aye. Hancock? Lowenthal? Pavley?
Aye.
Pavley, aye. Strickland?
Aye.
Strickland, aye. That's 4 yes, 1 no.
He has kids that play with toys.
4 yes,
I'll take
1
it. 1 no.
One
that would be Tony, I meant.
All right, it's getting to be a long day here. Thank you, Senator Corbett. Thank you to your witnesses. Members, that brings us to Senator Leno, SR 35. Senator Leno is still tied up in meeting, apparently, so I will present the 2 items that I have remaining while we hope that Senator Leno can break free. So why don't we start with SB 928.
Okay. So we did the consent already, and that had Senator Simitian's bills on it too, right? $14.01? No.
Senator Runner, this is SB 928. And this is the bill that I call the What's in It bill, and I am reintroducing the bill as a continuation from a discussion really that a couple years ago. Back in 2008, we were trying to find a way to respond to the substantial number of individual chemical bills that were making their way into the committee and through the legislative process. We ended up in 2008 actually turning that into a significant piece of the Green Chemistry Initiative along with Assemblymember Fuhrer and Governor Schwarzenegger. That process, as you know, is underway. Last year, in consultation with folks in the industry, I agreed to forego moving the bill forward while they rolled out some voluntary disclosure processes, see how those worked and how well those might work. For many years, consumers have assumed that somewhere in our process that someone was actually looking at what was in their ingredient, what ingredients were actually in these products. As you know, that's not always the case. The notion here is that a light touch, a non-regulatory touch, can work if consumers can make informed choices. If they have the ability to essentially take a look at a product or look on a website and ask and answer the simple question, what's in it? We've taken recent amendments that have significantly narrowed the bill so that we're looking at a narrow range of products. As I said, we've been in consultation with most of the affected parties now for the last 2 or 3 years. The bill is still a work in progress, and we continue to have conversations with folks, but we need to move the bill forward as those conversations take place, and I would respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Okay, and we're taking testimony in support. As you've been watching, we do 2 and 2, and we'll be glad to have you move ahead.
Thank you. My name is Gretchen Lee Salter. I'm the policy manager for the Breast Cancer Fund, and we are in strong support of this bill. As Senator Simitian said, this bill just simply tells us what's in it. It doesn't ban anything. It doesn't restrict anything. It just lets consumers make informed choices. As Senator Simitian has said, there are currently no laws on the books that require disclosure in cleaning products. So then when consumers go to the store, they're in the dark about what they're buying. When workers, who are vastly more exposed than the average consumer, when they're using these products, they are in the dark about the dangers that could potentially be in their products. Even when large institutions like hospitals and schools want to make informed purchases about the cleaning products that they use, many times they are in the dark and they don't know what ingredients are in those products. And when they ask, sometimes they get that information and sometimes they don't. So this bill would really change all of that. This bill would just really lift the veil on ingredients in our cleaning products. We really thank Senator Simitian for introducing this bill. We are eager to work with the industry and with all the stakeholders who are involved in the crafting of this bill. And just as a really side note, I would just say that this bill is really consistent with the administration's Green Chemistry Initiative. They have stated their desire to create a product ingredient network, and this really would be the first step in doing that. So really ask for your aye vote. Thank you.
Additional testimony and support.
Bill Allio for Environmental Working Group. I'll address, I think, a couple of the opposition's concerns. One is that this could suppress innovation. I think, on the contrary, it will improve innovation as companies try to find products that will make consumers feel safer. And they also said this will just confuse consumers. On the contrary, again, I think it will help consumers understand their choices. They may not be chemists, but we've seen in the marketplace now as all the green products coming out, people want to know, and they're willing to look and research and use the internet and ask their friends. So that's all this is doing, is more information for consumers, and we totally support that. Okay. Thank you.
Other supporters who want to add on as a Me Too support?
Me too. My name is Simeon Gant.
A name would be helpful.
My name is Simeon Gant, representing the Service Employees International Union and the Justice for Janitors, and we support the bill.
Thank you.
Bill McGovern, Sierra Club, California, support.
Thank you.
Lori Chen with Clean Water Action in support.
Nadia Bautista, Coalition for Clean Air in support.
Okay. Okay, now, testimony in opposition. We're doing two to give testimony. I hope you've worked all that out. You moved to be moving slowly, like you're trying to work it out.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, we've got, I would never presume to speak for the witnesses, but we've got a couple of groups that we've been working with over the last 2 or 3 years who may be in the in-between category or who have individual issues.
So how about if we get, is there specific opposition testimony first? Okay, let's do that, and then we can maybe make some time for those that are
tweeners.
In the tween. I got you. I hear you. Okay.
Yeah, I'm Mike Rogie with California Manufacturers and Technology Association. In our estimation, this bill is absolutely a work in progress, with most of the major pieces still totally unresolved. Protection of proprietary information is a significant concern to companies. Without protection of confidential business information, there's no incentive to try to invent better products. Manufacturers in California or others who decides to sell here would be setting themselves up to have their products copied by manufacturers in other states or countries. It would be a disincentive to doing business here. Companies can spend millions trying to perfect a product and on public relations only to have it pilfered. Also, this includes not just toxic and hazardous chemicals. Posting all ingredients on a website will simply confuse the public, who aren't going to be able to know the difference between one chemical and another. Some manufacturers are going to have hundreds of products, and some products can have hundreds of ingredients. No exemption for naturally occurring chemicals or non-intentionally added chemicals are in the bill. For example, a large amount of water supply in the state contains arsenic, but it has to meet drinking water standards, which allows 50 parts per million. Would the sight of arsenic as an ingredient cause an alarm? I think so. It's difficult to maintain accuracy. Many products have multiple suppliers, likely with a different chemical makeup, and in some industries, substitutions can be an everyday occurrence. In this bill, there's no provision for enforcement. That means that third-party lawsuits will be the only alternative. Manufacturers, wholesalers, and retailers will be dependent upon manufacturers outside the state or possibly outside the country, both to obtain information and for the accuracy of that information. There are just too many unanswered questions to allow this bill to move forward. We should let the scientists at Cal EPA, through the Green Chemistry Program, decide what chemicals and/or products should be restricted and not confuse the public and increase the cost of products.
Okay. Thank you.
Robert Callahan with the California Chamber of Commerce here in opposition. I want to first thank the Senator for working with the affected manufacturing industries on this bill and for the narrow scope that the bill currently is in. However, I think there's some practical issues that need to be addressed currently. Number one, I'll start with the definition of wholesaler is not what you would commonly understand to be a wholesaler. It is actually would apply to any wholesaler, retailer, importer, small business in California because it is only those who purchase from an out-of-state manufacturer for resale in California. So that is a retailer, that is a small business, that's not just wholesalers. So that needs to be addressed, and having each point in the chain of commerce be required to comply with this bill by posting the information on their website really creates duplicative and redundant compliance obligations, is going to increase the cost of consumer products. Secondly, the bill assumes the ability of in-state retailers and wholesalers to get to be able to compel the out-of-state manufacturers and even out-of-country manufacturers to give them this information for posting on their website. So in order to be compliant with the bill, they would have to get this information and rely on it in order to achieve compliance. We think that's very problematic. Finally, many small businesses are already struggling to survive and do not already have websites and would be forced to create a website with this information on it. We think that really is getting in the way of their ability to succeed in business, and we have other issues and would also repeat the comments made by the manufacturers, and we urge your opposition.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to have the tweeners with not a lot of testimony, if you will, please. You can kind of...
So why are you discriminating against?
Because you're tweeners.
That makes we're roadkill. Is that the idea?
So why don't you hit the highlights as to where you are? I assume this is a testimony about where you are in the negotiations and the concerns that you are being addressed and the ones that you still need to have addressed or something.
It's a little broader than that.
Okay. Well, we can't take a lot of time because you were tweeners, not opposition.
I'm Gene Livingston. My client is the Soap and Detergent Association.
Okay.
And as Senator Simitian mentioned, we worked with him in 2008 on SB 509. We also have started a voluntary program. It began first of this year. And you can go to our website, www.cleaning101, and you'll find all of our member companies, and they have listed their products and the ingredients in their products today, and we've got 99% of the products of our members covered in that voluntary program. We're okay with that mandate being put into legislation, and as you indicated, we do have a number of things that we need to accomplish in this bill, but we're committed to work with the author to achieve that.
Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Chair and members, Lori Nelson on behalf of the Consumer Specialty Products Association, and those are all product categories in the bill. In addition to the voluntary program, we have been having discussions with the Sierra Club Breast Cancer Fund, Healthy Homes, et cetera, and we stand behind our products. And with that, we also agree with the Senator's goal of transparency. We do have the concern with protecting our intellectual property rights. That's the big tension there.
Okay.
But if we are committed to working with the Senator on this issue, and we urge your vote.
Okay.
Gene Urban, on behalf of the Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers, I'll be very brief. Vehicles were previously clearly exempt because the most recent amendments delete.
Is your button on there, Gene, or you just...
I'm sorry.
There you go.
I represent the Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers. Previously, we were clearly exempt from the bill. The reference to the federal definition has been deleted and inserted now as a reference to automotive products. I don't believe that the author is after original equipment manufacturing and the vehicle, but we need some clarification.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Okay, discussion from the committee.
I just have a question. Thank you. I have a question of the author. Senator Simitian, do you believe that there is a way to craft the bill so that you can avoid the concern about disclosure of proprietary information?
Yes, but I don't know what it is yet. And I say that notwithstanding the fact that we've had a couple of years' worth of conversation about different models, and it clearly can be done. There are advantages and disadvantages to different approaches, and there are costs associated. I think if we had the tweeners here, and I will presume to speak for them, having heard them now for 2.5 years, I think what they'd say is, we're for transparency, but we're not for transparency in a way that compromises the value added of our confidential business information. And so the struggle has been, how can we manage that balance? Because obviously, on the one hand, you don't want to give away the secret formula. On the other hand, you don't want to let everybody claim they've got a secret formula when they're just trying not to tell you what's in their product. I should point out in response to this issue, though, Senator, the bill very clearly does not require particular amounts or proportions. So while it may say you have to tell us what's in it, it doesn't say you have to tell us what the formula is. It says you have to tell us what the ingredients are, and that is a very different thing. But this is part of the ongoing conversation that we're struggling with, and I would say I think all the stakeholders, frankly, have been doing a good job of working in good faith to try and get to yes on this piece.
Okay. Thank you. Other questions? Just a couple. Let me. I think that's an interesting discussion in regards to, somebody who has put together some kind of whatever it is, and it's working well, and now you don't want to tell all your competitors what's necessarily in it that makes it work so well. Has this been? Where has this been done before? Have they answered this? Whether it be EU or in another state, has it ever been accomplished?
If we can bring some of the tweeners back up, they can actually talk to you a little bit about that. There's a different discussion going on here in California, and there's a different discussion going on in Washington, D.C., and there's a discussion that's been going on in the European Union. And there are different ways to lay this out. The problem is, as I said, that some of them have costs, and then you get into the question of who bears the cost. So, for example, Senator, it would be, quote, easy enough, I suppose, to say if you claim you have confidential business information, send that to the appropriate state agency, let them warehouse that information. The information could be available upon request or to folks who have particular medical needs or concerns. But all of a sudden, there's a cost involved there. Then there's also the question of, in many of these instances, there really is the potential to simply reverse engineer what the contents are. And so we're sort of struggling with how this issue comes up, particularly in the fragrance world. And by fragrance, I don't necessarily mean perfumes and colognes. I mean any of the fragrances that you find in a cleaning supply, for example, where this issue comes up. On the one hand, the folks who are supportive will say all of that can be reverse engineered. On the other hand, other folks will say we need to protect our competitive advantage, and that's the struggle we've got.
Okay. Let me ask you the specific item that came up that I thought was kind of interesting, and that is as you are required to list out in items that are contained in whatever product, and you do have levels of some things that are acceptable to the point of drinking water, and one of those could be the issue of arsenic. So what happens to the individual? How do we deal with the fact that we've got somebody who is wanting to be informed, they see that, they're concerned about it, but in reality it is still at a level that's drinkable?
Yeah, I think there are two different issues. The first is, I think all the members of the committee know, just because something is naturally occurring doesn't mean it's a good thing. So arsenic was a good example, mercury is a good example, asbestos is a good example. Then this goes to another tough issue, which is nomenclature, which is an excruciatingly boring but important debate about how do we describe that which is in the product. And in fact, we've got some help from the folks at UC who put out the original green chemistry report, and they speak to the importance of describing in not only the right language, but in consistent language from product to product to product, what's in it, so that when you as a consumer go on that website, you would see the same language which would communicate with the same clarity in each case, naturally occurring amounts of whatever, for example, or trace amounts of whatever, or acceptable amounts of whatever. But defining that and having that be clear and consistent from product to product and description to description becomes important. And it's one of the challenges in the voluntary effort that's currently underway, which has a lot to recommend it, not to be commended in my view, but one of the problems is different folks describe it in different ways, and it makes it hard to know for sure what's in it and how can you compare from product to product if we're using a different nomenclature.
Okay. Any other testimony or comments? Is there a motion? The bill has a motion. Please call the roll.
Semidian.
Aye.
Semidian, aye. Runner.
No.
Runner, no. Corbett. Aye. Corbett, aye. Hancock. Lowenthal. Pavley. Pavley, aye. Strickland. With 3 yes, 1 no.
1, 2, 3. Yeah, 3. Yeah. Okay. What do we need in this committee right now?
4.
4. So we'll be waiting for the others to come back.
Thank you very much.
And you have a second bill, which is which one?
Mr. Chairman,
1401?
This is 1401.
Okay.
This is I would characterize this as a technical measure. It's a cleanup to AB 7 in the 8th extraordinary session, which was an Assembly Budget Committee bill dealing with the California Beverage Container Recycling and Litter Reduction Act, also known as the Bottle Bill. That measure, AB 7 in the 8th extraordinary, you will recall was part of the special budget session and designed to provide short-term relief to the Bottle Bill Fund. This bill contains some technical and clarifying changes that are needed to implement that measure as was intended. Unfortunately, the need for these changes came to light after that bill was signed by the governor. That previous measure, AB 7 in the 8th extraordinary, among other things, suspended some non-core expenditures such as public education and grants, and it required the Department of Resources, Recycling and Recovery to post the status of the funds on its website on a quarterly basis. This measure clarifies that some of those funds were already encumbered, and that if those funds were encumbered before becoming law, that the expenditures will be allowed. It also makes some conforming changes to the quarterly reporting requirements so that they actually match. Just that simple. Respectfully ask for
Okay, testimony and support.
Mr. Chairman and members, Tony Gonzalez representing Tomra Pacific, a convenience zone recycler operating about 400 sites throughout California. The bill at this point, we don't have a position on the bill. We do support the clarifying changes that I think were necessary by virtue of the passage of the bill that got us through this fiscal year. I do want to thank Senator Simitian and other members of the committee who made possible the enactment of that bill that gets us through, us being the convenience zone recyclers, through June 30th. And if there are to be discussions regarding a going forward fix, we look forward to being part of those discussions. And if this bill is part of that discussion or a vehicle for that, I look forward to joining you in that discussion. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Other testimony in public to another tweener. Is that what you're?
Another tweener.
This is
members,
concern for not what the bill is, but what it might.
Well,
go ahead.
Ralph Simone, representing the California and Nevada Soft Drink Association. I think it's fair to say that the concern that's currently in the bill was an unintended consequence with regards to the grants. And there is likewise several other unintended consequences. One was with regards to the processing fee relief. There was language in there that some members spoke to me about. How is this processing fee relief going to work? Tied back to 2009. What happened is that the manner in which the department interpreted that language created very disparate treatment amongst container types. For example, glass has a 0 increase from 2008. PET has a 360% increase from 2008, and HDPE, which are juice container packaging, has a 600% increase. My only point is that if we'd had that information while the bill was moving through the legislature, we probably would have parsed the language in a different manner. Another aspect of this is that when you look at 2008, the cumulative total of processing fee offsets was $88 million, but the department is only spending $80 million in 2010. So they've left, as a result of their interpretation, $8 million on the table. And at some point, we'd like to engage the senator in looking at resolving this unintended consequence as well. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members, Josh Pane on behalf of the California Refuse Recycling Council. I felt the senator was lonely up here, so I wanted to give our support for him and his piece of legislation. So the CRC is in support.
Thank you.
And we trust that he'll do the right thing going down the road as well.
Thank you. That's right. Okay. Did I ask for opposition or opposition? No? Is there opposition? Okay, discussion? Is there a motion? There's a motion on the bill by Senator Strickland. Please call the roll.
Semidion.
Aye.
Semidion, aye. Runner.
Aye.
Runner, aye. Corbett. Corbett, aye. Hancock. Lowenthal. Pavley.
Aye.
Pavley, aye. Strickland. Strickland, aye. That's 5 yes.
I think that just leaves us with a Senator Leno bill left.
Senator Leno, welcome. I know you've been off in another venue. I understand we have one of our members is absent today, and we have another member, at least one, who's got some time constraints. So I would encourage you to be your usual persuasive self in an even unusually more crisp fashion than is your wont. So welcome and thank you. Go to it.
Thank you. And I would ask for your aye vote.
Thank you.
The issue of the resolution has to do with the disclosure of inert ingredients in pesticides. And I came to be familiar with the subject somewhat during the spraying of the light brown apple moth, when there were hundreds and hundreds of residents in Monterey and Santa Cruz County who went to the hospital as a result of the spraying. What I came to learn was that oftentimes from 50 to 90% of the contents of these pesticides are inert ingredients, and that inert ingredients can be biologically active and chemically active and can have great danger even though they are inert. And as I said, upwards of 90% of content sometimes are these inert ingredients. So the U.S. EPA is looking into this matter and will consider the requirement of the disclosure on labels for these pesticides of both active and inert ingredients. And so this resolution urges the governor to make the case, and he's already on record as saying, yes, consumers should be fully aware of what they're being exposed to. We want to encourage him to encourage the U.S. EPA to take such actions, and I would ask for your aye vote.
Thank you. Witnesses in support?
Paul Towers, Pesticide Watch. I defer my time to the two experts.
Witnesses in support?
As succinctly as possible, if you could, because we've already done this in another committee together.
My name is Dave Tamar. I'm with the California Stormwater Quality Association. We're a statewide organization, and most of our members are cities, counties, and special districts that are subject to Clean Water Act water quality permits. And we since the mid-1990s, we've been subject to extreme liability due to pesticides that are discharged in stormwater to local creeks and rivers. We support the disclosure of inert ingredients because even inert ingredients that are non-hazardous in and of themselves, when combined into a product, they do their job and they help modify the product, and they can make that product as a whole more hazardous. And recent research done at the University of California, Davis has shown that it's inert ingredients and formulations that determine whether particular pesticides are either a problem or not a problem in our discharge. We would very much like to solve the problem of discharges without these inert ingredients being disclosed. Independent researchers and our own scientists and actually government regulators are severely hampered in determining which insecticide and other pesticide products. And thank you very much. We are in support of this resolution.
Thank you. Next witness.
My name is Stan Kino, and I'm here as both a member and a representative of the Association of Flight Attendants that represents approximately 55,000 flight attendants in 20 airlines in the U.S. I would like first to thank Senator Mark Leno and Assemblymember Bill Moaning for showing their unambiguous support for the federal government to require manufacturers of pesticide products to disclose any and all inert ingredients. I am here because many of our flight attendant members are exposed to pesticide products in the passenger cabin, which of course is our workplace. Pesticides are applied in the cabin for three key reasons: to control domestic bugs, to respond to complaints of bugs on board, and to comply with quarantine regulations of about 50 countries. Flight attendants are not covered by Occupational Safety and Health Administration regulations, and although the Federal Aviation Administration assumed jurisdiction over flight attendants' workplace safety and health in 1975, it has not issued any regulations to control workplace exposure to pesticides. Airlines do not inform passengers or crew prior to a flight either that the aircraft they are boarding was sprayed with pesticides or that it will be sprayed with pesticides in flight. In Sydney, Australia, aircraft cabin are sprayed while both passengers and crew are required to remain on board, and we remain on board until the officials there decide that saturation has been met. You can feel the moisture on your skin after it has settled. And as such, many of our members have reported pesticide product-related illnesses. The only information that flight attendants may have access to the medical safety data sheet, MSDS, for a given pesticide product, assuming they even know that the cabin has been treated. And yet the current MSDS provide very limited information on the chemical contents of these sprays. So you can see that it is very important that the labels and MSDS for pesticide products contain complete and detailed information on all of the chemical contents, and not just the active pesticide ingredients. That way, flight attendants who are exposed to a particular product and develop symptoms may provide complete chemical exposure information to their physicians. Full disclosure will provide useful information to exposed crew members, passengers, and their treating physicians. Such disclosure may also motivate airlines to minimize exposure where possible and use less toxic alternatives. On behalf of all the members at AFA-CWA, my flying partners exposed to pesticide products at work, we sincerely thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for your testimony. Do we have any other witnesses in support who'd like to come forward, just give their name, organization, if any, and their support position?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members, Donna Brownsey for the Breast Cancer Fund and support.
Thank you. Next witness.
Nidia Bautista with the Coalition for Clean Air, also in support.
Thank you. Next witness. Any other witnesses in support? Do we have any witnesses in opposition? If not, we'll bring it back to the committee. Senator Leno, do you want to forego a close?
Just to say that the reason that there is no opposition is that we have a clause in the final resolve that says, absent a finding that disclosure of particular ingredient will cause competitive harm. So we've addressed that issue. Hence, no opposition. I'd ask for your aye vote.
Thank you very much. Motion from Senator Corbett. Call the roll.
Simidian?
Aye.
Simidian, aye. Runner?
No.
Runner, no. Corbett? Aye. Corbett, aye. Hancock? Lowenthal? Aye. Lowenthal, aye. Pavley? Aye. Pavley, aye. Strickland? We have 4 yes and 1 no.
You have sufficient votes. Senator Hancock is absent today due to illness, and we're going to go through the roll one more time and allow absent members to add on.
Thank you very much.
All looks well. Thank you again for your testimony, folks. All right, members, why don't we ask staff to tee up the bills in agenda order, and we will take a final roll call vote on all of these items. The Dutton bills have already had a closed roll. That's correct.
Okay, item 1, SB 928. Present vote, 3 yes, 1 no.
This is
Item 1.
Simidian SB 928, Consumer Products.
Lowenthal, aye.
Lowenthal, aye. Strickland, so that's 4 yes and 1 no.
4-1, that bill is out. Agenda item number 2, the roll is already closed. That bill has failed. Reconsideration is granted. Agenda item number 3.
SB 1010, present vote, 1 yes, 4 no.
Call the absent members.
Runner?
Aye.
Runner, aye. That's 2 yes, 4 no.
That measure fails. Reconsideration is granted. Agenda item number 4.
Present vote, 4 yes, 1 no. Runner?
No.
Runner, no. Item 4.
4-2. That bill is out. Agenda item 5.
Item 5, SB 1100, present vote, 4 yes, 1 no. Runner?
No.
Runner, no. That's 4 yes, 2 no.
That bill is out. Agenda item number 6 by Senator Dutton. The roll is closed. That measure fails. Reconsideration is granted. Agenda item number 7.
SB 1326, present vote, 4 yes, 1 no. Runner?
No.
Runner, no. That's 4 yes, 2 no.
That bill is out. Agenda item number 8 by SB 1365 by Senator Corbett.
Present vote, 4 yes, 1 no.
Call the absent members.
Lowenthal.
This is agenda item number 8, SB 1365, Corbett.
Lowenthal, aye. That's 5 yes, 1 no.
That bill is out. Agenda item number 9, SB 1401, Simidian.
Present vote, 5 yes, 0 no. Lowenthal?
This is SB 1401?
Correct.
Aye.
Lowenthal, aye. That's 6 yes, 0 no.
That bill is out. Agenda item number 10 was pulled. It's been carried over till next week, or to our next meeting, forgive me. Agenda item number 11, environmental quality, was a consent calendar item. Do we have all members voting on consent?
Yes, we have.
Okay. Agenda item number 12, Environmental Quality Committee, also on the consent calendar. The consent calendar is approved. And that brings us then to our final item, number 13, SR 35 Leno. Call the absent members.
Present vote, 4 yes, 1 no. Strickland. So we have 4 yes, 1 no.
And that measure is out. Without objection, meeting is adjourned.